Chapter 1474. At the mention of Qin Zhou, she knew that this manager's resources were not to be underestimated. Hence, she had nothing to say. On the night of Louis Vuitton's special event, there would be a Milan fashion show banquet. The venue for the banquet would be the famous Milan Palace. As the former seat of government in Milan, the Milan Palace had not only carried the glory of history for many centuries, but it had also become an important cultural center, creating new miracles. The guests attending the banquet were all top celebrities from various industries. They were all star-studded and influential. World-class supermodels, international fashion moguls, Italian designers, the chairman of Milan Fashion Week, and top designers were all present. The lineup for the banquet was dazzling. On the list of invited guests, the top celebrities in the country were also on the list. Lin Ji had also tried her best to get an entry ticket. She was so excited that she was about to cry. It was a great honor for an artist to be invited to the Milan Palace for a fashion banquet. It was like stepping into the Hall of Fame of the fashion industry, shining with stars. As an artist collaborating with Louis Vuitton, Lin Ji also had to go to the styling room to get her hair done. Hence, it was inevitable that she would bump into Yun Shishir again. Qin Zhou turned on his mocking mode the moment he saw Lin Ji. "Hey, who is this? What's her name again? I can't remember. Shishir, is she also on the list of invitees for this banquet?" Yun Shishir pretended to be at a loss. "I don't remember." "Oh, look at my memory. How could I forget? This Milan fashion banquet is divided into invited guests and media collaborators. Invited guests are the VIPs invited by the organizers. Media collaborators, on the other hand, didn't receive an invitation but used the media's qualification to get in." Qin Zhou paused. Then, he sneered and said coldly, "I was wondering why I didn't see her name on the list of invited guests. So, she used the media's name to get in." This sentence, however, was full of killing power. Lin Ji's face was extremely ugly, but she still pretended to be elegant and argued, "President Qin, you must be mistaken. This time, I'm attending the banquet as the spokesperson for Louis Vuitton's new spring collection. What you said is nonsense." However, Qin Zhou smiled coldly and said disdainfully, "Aya, you're so smug just because you're the spokesperson for the new spring collection. You're really something." Lin Ji was completely speechless. She wanted to say something but stopped. However, in front of Qin Zhou, she felt that no matter how much she refuted, she had no power. Lin Ji stomped her feet angrily and went to change into her gown. She didn't want to embarrass herself in front of Qin Zhou. Yun Shishir secretly sighed in her heart. She had seen a lot of things, but when it came to poisonous tongues, Qin Zhou was still a level higher. "Go and change your clothes," Qin Zhou exhorted her. Yun Shishir went into the changing room with the assistant who was holding the gown. Qin Zhou raised his hand to check the time. He walked to the balcony and made a call to Gu Xingze to arrange a meeting. Lin Ji changed into her gown and came out. She saw that Qin Zhou wasn't around. When she saw Yun Shishir in the changing room, her eyes darted around and she suddenly thought of a wicked move. Thus, she waved her hand and called her assistant over. Then, she whispered a few words in her ear. "Remember, take advantage of Qin Zhou's absence and quickly do it." Chapter 1475. Lin Ji sneered and glanced in the direction of Yun Shishir's dressing room with evil intentions. Then, she went into the dressing room to get her hair done. "Humph, Yun Shishir, aren't you smug? Just wait and see. Let's see how lawless you can be when Qin Zhou isn't around." Lin Ji's assistant was called Xiao Ling. She had been following Lin Ji since her debut. She was very efficient in her work and shared a common enemy with Lin Ji. Moreover, she was very vicious. She remembered that when Lin Ji was filming a period drama, a second female lead had stolen her role. Under Lin Ji's instructions, the assistant had dragged the second female lead to a hotel and beaten her up. The assistant had stripped her of all her clothes and taken many unsightly photos. The assistant had then used the photos to blackmail the second female lead and demanded that she respect Lin Ji in everything she did. This second female lead had just graduated from an art school. She had no power or background. Because she was a professional, her acting skills were not bad. Although it was a supporting role, it was not easy to get this role. When she acted, she was reserved and professional. Compared to other actors, she was a more innocent little girl. After being blackmailed with so many unsightly photos, the second female lead was scared witless. Therefore, when she was on the set, she did as Lin Ji wished. Not only was she obedient, but she also wanted to worship Lin Ji like a living Buddha. This was not a big deal. After being scolded by the director, Lin Ji was in a bad mood and often vented her anger on the second female lead. The way she vented her anger was disgusting. Let's not talk about the heartless ones for now. Once, Lin Ji came back from the set. Because she was angry, she took off her shoes and asked the second female lead to lick her feet clean. How overboard was this? Lin Ji actually dared to ask for it. The second female lead could not accept it and was very unwilling. Lin Ji called Xiao Ling over, and when Xiao Ling arrived, she beat her up again. Only then did the second female lead obediently give in. Moreover, she cared a lot about her innocence, so she could only obey humbly. Not only did she lick Lin Ji's feet clean, she was even forced to drink a few mouthfuls of the water used to wash her feet. The entire process was recorded by Xiao Ling. The next day, the second female lead went to the set. When the director saw the bruises on her arms and shoulders, he thought that the bruises were caused by something dirty. Hence, he fired her from the set on the grounds that she was having an affair with a man on set. Actually, this second female lead was a pity. She was pretty, capable, and kind-hearted. If it weren't for Lin Ji, she might have shot to fame with this role. However, after the drama aired, she left the entertainment industry and went into hiding. After leaving the entertainment industry, she married a rich businessman with her good looks. However, Lin Ji found out about this. Therefore, she sent the unsightly photos that the girl had been forced to take to the rich businessman's mailbox. She also spread a rumor that the girl had been involved in a relationship with a man and a woman in the crew. She was called out by the director and kicked out of the crew. When the rich businessman found out about it, he was so angry that he divorced her after half a year of marriage. Then, Lin Ji used some tricks to seduce this rich businessman. She was booked by him for a period of time and obtained some resources from him. Through this rich businessman, she met a famous director and used this famous director's TV series to become famous. Chapter 1476. On the surface, she looked bright and innocent. Only then did Mu Shi fall in love with her. What she did not know, however, was that she was a very sinister person in private. In fact, Lin Ji was very petty. Once she bore a grudge against someone, she would not let the matter rest until her reputation was ruined. Earlier, she had whispered to her assistant to sneak to Yoon Shirshir's changing room with her phone and secretly take a few photos of Yoon Shirshir changing into her gown. This was not the first time she had done such a despicable thing. Xiao Ling smiled knowingly. Taking advantage of Qin Zhou's absence, she sneaked to Yoon Shirshir's changing room and stood on a stool. With the help of the selfie stick, she stretched her hand in the direction of Yoon Shirshir's changing room. The camera was muted, so Yoon Shirshir did not notice even after a dozen photos were taken. She was struggling with her gown. Louis Vuitton's gowns were more cumbersome to wear, so she was focused on putting on nipple pads. The stylist wanted her to squeeze as much cleavage as possible. The more obvious it was, the better. Yoon Shirshir, on the other hand, was frowning and did not want to be too revealing. Xiao Ling succeeded just like that. Holding the photos in her hands, she was secretly delighted for a while. She then opened the door and was about to go out to ask for a reward from Lin Ji. When she opened the door just now, she only felt a tall figure standing at the door, as if blocking all the light. His tall and big body stood tall like a dark cloud. Xiao Ling was startled and her heart trembled. She raised her head and saw a man as handsome as a god. Xiao Ling's heart tightened. It was not because of this man's handsome looks that angered both men and gods, nor was it because of his powerful aura that made one's heart tremble. It was because at this moment, this man's eyes were as sharp as ice, piercing her body and making her tremble. Mu Yaja blocked the door, his handsome face gloomy. He had just arrived at the studio and heard that Yoon Shirshir was in the changing room, so he wanted to take a look. As soon as she arrived, She saw a selfie stick sticking out from the ceiling of Yun Shishir's changing room. She could vaguely see that the camera had been turned on and had secretly taken a few pictures. His eyes were extremely sharp, and he immediately saw that the phone screen had captured Yun Shishir's half-naked body. His anger immediately surged. Who was it? How dare he secretly take photos of her changing clothes? Xiao Ling was shocked by his expression, but she did not know the identity of the man in front of her. She asked stupidly, "Who are you? Don't you know it's scary to suddenly appear at the door?" Wuxia was silent, but his eyes fell on her phone. Xiao Ling did not notice his anger at all. She looked around and asked suspiciously, "Who are you? Don't you know that this is the VIP lounge? Unauthorized personnel are not allowed in. What were you doing just now?" Wuxia questioned. When Xiao Ling heard this, she was stunned and felt guilty. She instinctively held her phone tightly behind her back and asked innocently, "What does it have to do with you?" However, she was panicking inside. Could it be that this man had come in just now? What a bad time. Could it be that he had seen her every move? Xiao Ling cursed silently and said fiercely. Then she wanted to retreat. "I'm not going to talk nonsense with you. I have something to do. Stop right there." Wuxia abruptly grabbed her arm and pulled her back without a word. Chapter 1477. In the changing room, Yun Shishir was alarmed by the argument outside the door. She put on her gown and hurried out. However, she was stunned when she saw the confrontation at the door. Why are you here?" Yun Shishir was confused when she saw Wuxia. This was Louis Vuitton's VIP room for women. How could he barge in so openly? She took a closer look at the woman in Wuxia's hand and found her rather familiar. Yun Shishir thought about it seriously. Wasn't this Lin Ji's assistant? Why was she here? Just as Yun Shishir was wondering, Xiao Ling started to struggle fiercely. "You, let go of me. What are you doing?" Although this man was quite handsome, but why was he grabbing her hand for no reason and not letting go? Xiao Ling complained in her heart. Mainly, she felt very guilty and wanted to leave this place quickly. "Hand over your phone." Wuxia grabbed one of her hands and glared at her with a gloomy expression. His eyes were filled with rage. He never had the habit of being rough with women, but that didn't mean that he would tolerate it to the end. Xiao Ling was so flustered that she broke out in cold sweat. Qin Zhou had just finished his call when he heard the argument coming from the VIP changing room. He carefully knocked on the door and heard a man's voice. He didn't know what was going on, but the voice of the opposite sex alerted him. He immediately pushed the door open and entered. However, when he saw the confrontation in front of him and saw that the woman Wuxia was holding was Lin Ji's assistant, his expression turned ugly. "This is Shishir's changing room. Why did you sneak in?" Xiao Ling pouted innocently. I went in the wrong way. I didn't do it on purpose. Why are you so agitated?" Wuxia sneered at her matter-of-factly manner. "You secretly took photos of her," he said sternly. Yun Shishir didn't react for a moment when she heard that. However, when she calmed down and saw the phone in Xiao Ling's hand, she thought of the scene in the changing room and felt a chill in her heart. She secretly took photos of her? Thinking of this, Yun Shishir was furious. She took a few steps closer to her and asked sternly, "Did you secretly take a picture of me changing my clothes?" When Qin Zhou heard this, he immediately understood. His gaze was no longer as gentle as before. Instead, it became sharp. "You secretly took photos of Shishir changing clothes?" "No." Xiao Ling tried her best to defend herself. "Are you guys kidding me? I was just holding my phone. And all of you are actually accusing me of taking photos secretly? I saw it." With only 4 words from Wuxia, Yun Shishir did not suspect anything. What kind of person was Wuxia? Why would he wish for a nobody for no reason? Hence, she walked forward and snatched the phone while Xiao Ling was distracted. My phone. Give it back to me." Xiao Ling was extremely nervous. Yun Shishir pursed her lips coldly. Without looking at her, she picked up Xiao Ling's phone and opened the screen. The phone was very new. It looked like it was bought a few days ago. It was the latest model of the iPhone 7 Plus. She didn't even have time to set a password. Hence, she opened the photo album and quickly found solid evidence in the album. Chapter 1478. Yoon Shirshir's face turned redder and redder. She scrolled through the photos and deleted them one by one. When she was done, she realized that more than 20 photos had been secretly taken. She flew into a rage out of humiliation. Gripping her phone tightly, she glared at him and said angrily, "You secretly took photos of me changing clothes. How can you be so shameless? Who told you to do this?" Mu Yaja's gaze turned even colder when he heard that. He tightened his grip even more. Xiao Ling sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain. She felt as if her wrist was about to be broken by this man. Oh my God! What is this man doing? Why is his strength so terrifying? Qin Zhou sneered, his eyes filled with mockery. Who else could it be? It must be her master who ordered her to do this. The master he was referring to was none other than Lin Ji. Xiao Ling gulped nervously. Before she could explain herself, Yoon Shirshir threw her brand-new phone to the ground in a fit of anger. The brand-new iPhone 7 Plus broke into pieces from the violent and intimate contact with the ground. The screen shattered into pieces. Xiao Ling cried out in pain. Her heart ached for her newly bought phone. This was a new phone she had just bought. How could it be broken just like that? Xiao Ling was furious, but she didn't dare to say anything. At that moment, Lin Ji had just finished doing her hair. Hearing the commotion in the changing room, she hurried over. She was shocked to see such a huge commotion when she opened the door just now. Instinctively, she realized that her assistant had messed up the job. Lin Ji's throat moved. She glared at Xiao Ling from the corner of her eye, annoyed at her incompetence. Xiao Ling received her cold glare and shrunk her neck in fear. She pursed her lips. Now that she had been caught red-handed, she wanted to cry but had no tears. Lin Ji was only thinking about how to clean up the mess. Thus, she quickly asked, "What's the situation?" Mu Yaja turned around and met her eyes. He glanced at her condescendingly but didn't say a word. In his eyes, this Lin Ji didn't have the right to make him speak. When Lin Ji saw him, she was so scared that her legs went soft. When she entered the room just now, her attention was all focused on Yoon Shirshir and Xiao Ling. In her panic, she didn't notice Mu Yaja's existence at all. However, when he saw that it was him, he was so scared that he couldn't stand still. She had seen him once. This man was the Supreme Emperor of Huanyu. Mu Yaja was the CEO of Dishing Financial Group, the highest executive. Huanyu Entertainment was just one of his many businesses. It was said that he was a rather swift and decisive person. Why was he here? Lin Ji was a little confused. What's the situation? Don't you feel guilty asking this question? Qin Zhou snorted coldly. He had been in the industry for many years and was quite experienced. How could he not see that Xiao Ling had secretly taken nude photos of Shirshir under Lin Ji's instructions? His mockery made Lin Ji's face even more embarrassed. However, who was she? Her acting skills were superb. When she pretended to be innocent, it was very convincing. Anger and shock appeared on her face. At the same time, she looked at Xiao Ling with a pained expression and said in disappointment, "Xiao Ling, what did you do?" You secretly took nude photos of Yoon Shirshir?" Lin Ji interrogated sternly. When she said this, it was as if she wanted to push all the blame onto Xiao Ling. Chapter 1479. She thought that Lin Ji would help her exonerate herself, but she didn't expect her to change the topic and pour all the dirty water on her. For a moment, Xiao Ling felt wronged and disappointed. She wanted to say something but stopped herself. "Tell me, did you do it? Did you do it?" Lin Ji glared at her. Her hoarse voice was filled with disappointment and pain. Lin Ji's acting skills were good to begin with, especially at a time like this. It was vividly displayed. Xiao Ling widened her eyes helplessly, her mouth slightly agape. She was caught off guard by Lin Ji's sudden change in attitude. Surrounded by so many people, Lin Ji was the only one on her side. Even though she was the only one on her side, she was still questioning her sternly. She was so scared that her legs almost turned to jelly. What was she doing? What was Lin Ji trying to do? Why was she questioning her so fiercely? Wasn't she the one who ordered her to do all this? Now, not only did she not help to exonerate herself, but she even poured all the dirty water on her. She had to bear such a big black pot. How wronged was she? However, she couldn't blame Lin Ji for not helping her at all. She was already caught red-handed. How could she still argue? Even if Lin Ji wanted to exonerate her, she would only implicate herself. Lin Ji was a person who knew how to sail according to the wind. She looked around and immediately jumped out to clear her name once she saw that the situation was not right. One couldn't help but admire Lin Ji's brilliance. Qin Zhou narrowed his eyes dangerously. He had many doubts about Lin Ji's attitude in his heart. He didn't even need to think about it. Xiaoling had been ordered. If not for Lin Ji's order, how could she have thought of using such a method to secretly take photos of Shirshir? Lin Ji winked at Xiaoling from an angle where no one could see, wanting her to cooperate with her act. However, Xiaoling was in a state of panic at this moment. How could she understand her look? She shrunk her shoulders in fear. She looked at Qin Zhou's gloomy face for a while, and then looked at Mu Yaja, who was as awe-inspiring as a god. She was terrified to the extreme, and her lips trembled as she explained, I really didn't, Yun Shirshir said in disgust. I've already seen it. Why are you still trying to defend yourself? Is there any use? Qin Zhou's voice became even harsher. Why did you do that? Why did you think of stealing Shirshir's photos? Are you under someone's orders? Xiao Ling was so shocked that her shoulders trembled. She subconsciously glanced at Lin Ji with a helpless and hesitant gaze. Lin Ji was furious. This Xiaoling was so stupid. Why didn't he know how to cooperate with her? Thus, she said angrily, I didn't expect you to be so vicious. Why are you still quibbling? Why did you secretly take photos of her? Zhizhi you? Xiaoling was aggrieved and scared. She subconsciously wanted to rat Lin Ji out. Lin Ji saw that the situation wasn't right. She rushed in front of Xiaoling and gave her 2 tight slaps. I've really misjudged you. I didn't expect you to use such despicable methods. Xiaoling was slapped hard. She only felt a burning pain on her face. Her face was slapped to one side. She subconsciously covered her face and looked at Lin Ji in shock. She didn't expect her to be such a person. Chapter 1480. Sob, sob, sob. She was so aggrieved that she started crying. Lin Ji frowned angrily. You're still crying. How dare you cry? Then, she carried Xiaoling to Yun Shirshir and pushed her. Why are you crying? Apologized to Shirshir. Sob, sob, sob. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Xiaoling had no choice but to apologize while crying. Yun Shirshir's face was cold as she looked at the master-servant pair in front of her expressionlessly. Everyone present knew that Xiaoling was being used by Lin Ji. However, Lin Ji was one step ahead and put on a good show. Xiaoling was also willing to take the blame so no one could say anything. Seeing that Yun Shirshir's face was still cold, Lin Ji slapped Xiaoling again. Do you think you can just apologize like that? You're not sincere at all. Kneel down and apologize. You have to make her forgive you. Although Xiaoling was unwilling, she had no choice but to kowtow under Lin Ji's pressure. Bang, bang, bang. Every time he kowtowed, he would apologize. His voice was loud and clear. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I'm sorry, please forgive me. I'm sorry, I really know my mistake. Lin Ji stood together with her arms crossed like a vicious queen, looking at Xiaoling kowtowing with satisfaction. Yun Shirshir felt disgusted no matter how she looked at her. She was the one who instigated it, but she pushed all the blame to others. If it were her, she would not do such a thing. She thought about how Lin Ji had sent someone to secretly take photos of her changing clothes. Fortunately, she did not succeed. Just imagining the consequences of letting Lin Ji have her way was enough to make one shudder. Yun Shirshir was also secretly angry at herself for being careless. She did not notice that someone had secretly taken photos of her. There was no lack of such ruthless people in the entertainment industry who used such vicious methods to harm others. All right, don't be an eyesore in front of me. I won't forgive you, Yun Shirshir said. Lin Ji's expression changed and she immediately explained, Sure. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by won't forgive you? Don't you know very well what I mean by that? Yun Sure snorted coldly. Since ancient times, only villains can be offended. Today, I'll give you a way out, but that doesn't mean that I'm a pushover. If something like this happens again, I'll expose your despicable methods to the media. Lin Ji's eyes turned sharp, but when she caught a glimpse of Mu Yaja and Qin Zhou's cold faces, she could only suppress the anger in her heart. There are some things that I have to make clear. I really didn't instruct Xiao Ling to do this. Yun Sure, you don't have to make oblique accusations. You don't have any evidence to back up your suspicions. I'm not afraid of crooked shadows. You can say whatever you want, but I have a clear conscience. With that, she turned around and kicked Xiao Ling. Why are you still kneeling? Let's go. Xiao Ling stood up with tears in her eyes. She glared hatefully at Yun Sure and left with Lin Ji. Yun Sure was speechless. She had seen thick-skinned people, but she had never seen such a thick-skinned person. What a weirdo. Mu Yaja walked to Yun Sure and sized her up. He frowned and scolded. How could you be so careless? You let someone take advantage of you. Yun Sure stuck out her tongue. I didn't notice. Bang! Mu Yaja flicked her forehead. Chapter 1481. If he hadn't noticed it in time, who knew what would have happened next? Was this stupid woman so stupid? Qin Zhou suddenly asked, Chairman Mu, what a coincidence. You're in Milan too? Yes. Mu Yaja nodded. His meaningful gaze fell on Yun Sure. Every word he said was extremely ambiguous. I'm in Milan to handle some business. Business? Yun Sure almost choked on her saliva. She couldn't be the official business that he was talking about, right? Why did such a plain sentence sound so ambiguous when it came out of his mouth? What a terrible man. Yun Sure pouted in her heart. Qin Zhou raised his eyebrows. Chairman Mu, what brings you here today? She'll be my female companion on the red carpet tonight. Qin Zhou was stunned when he heard this. For a moment, his expression was complicated. Previously, Gu Xingze had already told him that Yun Sure would be his female companion on the red carpet. Firstly, it could solidify the hype of the couple and promote the upcoming movie. He had already made arrangements with the media. Secondly, it could solidify the remaining hype of the first episode of The Lover's Diary, with Yun Sure and Xingze, who knew that Mu Yaja would appear out of nowhere. Mu Yaja, however, was unaware of what the manager was thinking. Are you going to wear this tonight? As soon as he finished speaking, he looked down and was suddenly attracted by the gown she was wearing. She had purposely chosen the gown Gu Xingze had sent over today. This gown wasn't considered conservative. It was pulled low at the chest and the stylist had done his best to squeeze a little cleavage. It was very eye-catching and eye-catching. It was too revealing. The gown was a tube top and had a low-cut design. Her voluptuous breasts were almost on the verge of popping out. Yun Sure's body was the type that was skinny but not voluptuous. When Yun Sure was a teenager, her breasts weren't so voluptuous. Perhaps it was because she had been breastfeeding, but her breasts were more developed. Coupled with the nipple pads, it was simply impossible for men to take their eyes off her. It was too exposed. It made people involuntarily want to press her down on the bed and ruthlessly humiliate her. Mu Yaja commented in his heart. Change out of this, he suddenly ordered. Qin Zhou was a little confused. Why? Mu Yaja glanced at him coldly. Don't you think it's too revealing? Qin Zhou was at a loss for words. All right, it was indeed a little exposed. But for a Fashion Week banquet, this was already considered a conservative approach. Some Hollywood actresses even appeared in see-through outfits. Sure was already being very conservative. Alas, even if he were given 10 guts, he would not dare to say this in front of the man. Go and exchange for the one I sent over. Mu Yaja's deep voice was filled with unquestionable determination. Yun Sure pursed her lips, but there was nothing she could do about it. She did not resist and could only hug the qipao he sent over to her and enter the fitting room. About 10 minutes later, Yun Sure walked out of the fitting room. She walked in front of the mirror and compared herself. Wuxia turned sideways to look. However, his originally deep and bottomless eyes suddenly had a flash of amazement. For more than 10 seconds, he was deeply mesmerized by her and could not take his eyes off her. Qin Zhou was also stunned. Chapter 1482. The gown was designed in the style of a cheongsam. The style was pure, just like the style of the old Shanghai cabarets in the 1920s. However, this gown was not a traditional cheongsam. It was a fusion of Chinese and Western elements, a combination of Chinese and Western elements. Unexpectedly, Yun Shishir looked surprisingly beautiful in it. This gown retained the standing collar, slit, rolled edges, luxurious fabrics, and embroidery. It extended the skirt to the length of the floor, creating a precedent for the cheongsam evening gown. The design of the slit up to the knees weakened the sexy elements and added a bit of royal majesty. The position from the neck to the collarbone was designed with a hollowed-out design. The white skin and sexy collarbone could only be glimpsed, but to a great extent, it interpreted the beauty of the Chinese sex appeal, giving people a kind of looming feeling. The cheongsam was sleeveless, revealing Yun Shishir's fair shoulders and slender arms. Every stitch and line of the embroidery on the gown was handmade, showing the magnificence of aristocracy. The slit on both sides rose to the hips, but it was just enough to cover it. It was not considered revealing, only a pair of jade legs faintly showing. Such an absolute territory, but it had a slightly heart-throbbing feeling. The waist was tight, and the exquisite figure was perfectly revealed. Looking from afar, it was exquisite and beautiful. Not every woman could interpret the beauty of a cheongsam. When Yun Shishir put on this gown, people felt that she had lost some of her youthfulness and gained some elegance and magnificence. More importantly, there was a charm that had settled down over time. Women were like flowers, like winter plum blossoms in the snow. They were proud and self-admiring, but with the most arrogant attitude, they looked down on the passing of time elegantly. Yun Shishir's temperament was more pure, but this gown deepened and subverted her temperament. It became mature and beautiful. Between her eyebrows, there was a seductive look, as if there was an endless charm to it. Even Qin Zhou was secretly depressed that he had misjudged the situation. Yun Shishir's style was no less inferior to the ink-style gown that Mr. Gong had sent over. Beautiful. So beautiful. For a moment, it was hard to find words to describe this ascetic beauty. Wuxia did not expect that Yun Shishir would be so suitable for this dress. When she wore it, she was so beautiful that he could not look straight at her. An enchanting beauty assaulted his face. For a moment, he actually felt his body heating up slightly. Because of her appearance, he couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. Deep down in his bones, a man deeply loved the beauty of a woman, which was a bit erotic and a bit ascetic. However, he wished that this beauty belonged to him alone. Yun Shishir saw his burning gaze on her body. She shyly tugged at her skirt and asked curiously, "How do I look in this?" Wuxia suddenly snapped out of his thoughts and slowly took a few steps towards her. "What do you think?" Wuxia leaned over, stretched out his arms, and trapped her in his arms. His thin lips were close to her ears, and his breath was like orchids. "My body is heating up just by looking at you. Don't you think it looks good?" Yun Shishir's face was burning hot. "Hey!" She couldn't help but push him. "Don't be indecent. Can you answer me seriously?" "I'm answering you very seriously." "Oh." Chapter 1483. Hey! Yun Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry. Being stared at by him with such a burning gaze, she could only feel her face heating up. She could not help but feel a little helpless. Wuxia lowered his gaze to look at her bashful and timid face. He could not help but nod his head and kiss her. Qin Zhou, who was standing by the side, coughed somewhat unwisely. Ahem. "Oh, please. He was still here, all right? Could he not flirt with his woman as if there was no one else around?" Qin Zhou spoke up at the wrong time, interrupting Wuxia's actions. The man turned his gaze and glanced at Qin Zhou with slight displeasure. Even though he only said that he was slightly displeased, When Mu Yaja's somewhat impatient gaze landed on Qin Zhou's face, the poor Qin Zhou only felt as if he had died 10,000 times in those few seconds of being stared at by him. After filtering through more than 1,000 horrible ways to die in his mind, he felt the urge to retreat. He coughed awkwardly and pretended to be innocent. "Chairman Mu Shishir, I still have something to do. I'll make a call first." With that said, the soles of his feet were greased with oil and he left. Yun Shishir furrowed her brows in annoyance, and her face burned even more. Why did this man not care about the occasion at all? She pushed him a little angrily. "Hey, even if you're in heat, you should at least look at the occasion." In heat? Mu Yaja looked back and glared at her in disbelief. This woman, had she become bold? She actually dared to use the word heat to describe him. "What? Aren't you in heat right now? There's someone else here. Can you be more careful? Heh. Let me show you what it means to be in heat. All right?" Just as Mu Yaja finished speaking, Yun Shishir's sixth sense suddenly warned her that the situation was not good. She immediately wanted to avoid him. I still need to do my hair." With that said, she wanted to quickly leave his line of sight. However, who was Mu Yaja? Would he give her a chance to escape? He didn't allow her to resist at all. He just grabbed her waist with one hand and pulled her into his arms. With a bang, he pressed her against the door of the changing room. Yun Shishir did not even have time to protest before the man nimbly turned her over, forcing her to face the door. Following that, his tall body boldly pressed against her. Even though they were separated by 2 layers of clothes, she could still feel the changes in his body, and her heartbeat became even more rapid. "Hey, Mu Yaja, don't act recklessly," Yun Shishir exclaimed in surprise and said in a low voice. "Act recklessly?" Mu Yaja's sexy and magnetic voice lingered in her ears, revealing a bit of devilish charm and provocation. Between his words, there was a hint of hidden meaning. "You're obviously looking forward to it. Huh? Anticipation? What was there to look forward to?" Yun Shishir bit her lips. Just as she was about to get angry, the man's hand lifted the hem of her cheongsam. She exclaimed and wanted to stop him, but he did not intend to give her the chance. "It should be very exciting to do it in the changing room. Mu Yaja, don't do it here." Yun Shishir blushed and her heart pounded. She felt his fingers roaming around her body, and for a moment, she panicked. "Are you a beast? Even if I'm a beast, I was awakened by you. Your brain is filled with sperm. Beast." Yun Shishir still could not stop being angry. Mu Yaja curled his lips and his eyes were playful. Chapter 1484. Yun Shishir struggled slightly, but in the next second, her wrists were easily restrained by him. He entered her from behind as she resisted slightly. Without any foreplay, it was slightly difficult to enter and exit. However, as his skills deepened, her body gradually relaxed. He pressed on top of her and made love for a long time. When her body went limp, he vented all of it on her body. After everything was over, Yun Shishir felt that her legs were so weak that she couldn't stand up. Her legs turned to jelly. She gritted her teeth, feeling extremely embarrassed. She could only let herself go limp in his arms and do whatever she wanted. Mu Yaja carried her to the sofa and carefully cleaned her body. There was a sink in the changing room. He took a hot towel and wiped her clean. Yun Shishir suddenly remembered that he didn't use any safety measures just now. She sat up and glared at him. "Hey, just now you." Mu Yaja calmly raised his eyes and looked at her quizzically. Did you wear that?" Yun Shishir blushed and asked. "No." A certain man's tone was so righteous that it couldn't be any worse. She flew into a rage out of humiliation. "No? Why didn't you use any safety measures?" After saying that, she started counting with her fingers. "My last period was... the safe period should be..." After counting for a long time, Yun Shishir slapped her forehead and said in distress, "I'm not on my period today." After thinking about it, she looked as if she was facing death calmly. "Forget it." Mu Yaja curled his lips and heard her say seriously, "I'll buy some morning after pills later." The man was furious. "No! Why not? It's not good for your body to take pills. Yun Shirsher retorted in an unfriendly tone. Hey, you're being unreasonable. If it weren't for the fact that you didn't use any safety measures, would I need to take emergency morning after pills? If I don't take them, it'll be very dangerous. I'm in a dangerous period today. What are you afraid of? Mu Yaja frowned, but he was annoyed by her fuss. I'm not irresponsible. Yun Shirsher was startled. She heard him say, if you are pregnant, you can stay at home and take care of the baby. He dreamed of having another child with her. It would be best if she was a little princess. He dreamed that she could give birth to a daughter for him. He liked daughters very much. If she could give birth to a daughter, he would treasure her in the palm of his hand and give her endless love. Yun Shirsher was stunned for a while, but she said resolutely, I won't. You're not? Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes dangerously. His expression was slightly angry. Why should I give birth to your child? Oh, you think you can give birth to a child just because you want to? You didn't even ask for my opinion. I don't want to give birth. Yun Shirsher said unhappily. Mu Yaja suddenly grabbed her chin. You don't want to? This woman was actually unwilling to give birth? Yes, I don't want to. Why? There's no why. Yun Shirsher was silent for a while, then said, my career is on the rise now. I want to work hard on my career first. Let's put everything else aside for now. No. Mu Yaja said unhappily, is your so-called career acting? Or is it like today? Dressing up beautifully and being followed by the media like stars chasing the moon? Chapter 1485. He especially didn't like her like this. At first, he didn't approve of her career. It wasn't that he was biased against people from the entertainment industry, but he felt that as a man, it was his duty to provide for his wife. With his wealth, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it wouldn't be a problem to provide for 1,000, 10,000, or even 1,000,000 of her. He felt that she didn't need to work. But back then, she had said that if he were to raise her, she would feel like a canary trapped in a cage with no freedom. She wanted to work and be financially independent. At least she could earn enough money to support herself. He respected her and silently made way for her. But if it was for work, she had to sacrifice to this extent. He only hoped that her beauty and all the good things she had would be enjoyed by him alone. He didn't want anyone else to covet her beauty. Yun Shirsher furrowed her brows. She was a little unhappy with his evaluation of her work. To her, entering the entertainment industry was a complete coincidence. When she was in university, she majored in media and her dream was to become an outstanding actress. She liked acting not because she liked the scenery, but because she liked the arts. She liked to challenge any role that was challenging. Every time her performance was recognized, she would feel a sense of accomplishment from the bottom of her heart. Regarding the issue of children, Yun Shirsher didn't think what Mu Yaja thought. They weren't officially married yet. Wasn't it too early to talk about children? Moreover, she already had 2 children. With Yu and Xiaoi Chen, she didn't dare to take the risk. If she had another child, would Yu reject it? Would Xiaoi Chen reject it? When the time came, what if Yu couldn't accept the arrival of a new life? Not to mention these 2 little guys, even she herself wasn't prepared. Hence, Yun Shirsher held his face and said coquettishly, let's not talk about this now, okay? I'm not ready yet. Moreover, I'm not your wife in name. Why should I give birth to your children? Mu Yaja's gaze froze for a moment before he circled his arms around her waist. You'll be my wife, Mu Yaja. You don't have to think about this at all. You want to marry me, but I may not be willing. Yun Shirsher coldly snorted and said somewhat haughtily. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes dangerously. What? Are you not willing to be my wife? Yun Shirsher lifted her jade-like chin and smiled gracefully. That depends on your sincerity. As soon as she finished speaking, she pushed him away and stood up. Lifting the hem of her dress, she turned around and walked to the full-length mirror. The brightest design of this gown was the side of the hemline. It was a skirt-like design with black organza that extended to the ground. It was very beautiful. She looked at the mirror and struck a pose, looking proud and confident. At this moment, Yun Shirshir was definitely the most beautiful. Actually, there was one thing that she didn't say. One of the reasons why she wanted to become an actress was because he was such an outstanding man. Before becoming his wife, she wanted to become more outstanding, to become someone who was worthy of him. Yun Shirshir looked at the mirror and lifted her chin slightly. Her lips curled into a beautiful smile. Suddenly, Mu Yaja's calm voice came from behind her. "Walk the red carpet with me tonight." Chapter 1486. Tonight? You're going too? Yun Shirshir looked at the suit he was wearing. She did not realize why he was dressed so formally. Was he invited to tonight's banquet too? Mu Yaja replied. "You will be my female companion." Yun Shirshir was stunned. She suddenly remembered that Gu Xingze had asked her to walk the red carpet with him. So she said, No, why not? Mu Yaja obviously could not accept her answer. "Give me a reason." Yun Shirshir smiled elegantly and seemed to be provoking him. "Mr. Mu, I have an appointment." "Is that a reason?" Mu Yaja snorted coldly. Rejected. How could he not know that Gu Xingze had asked Yun Shirshir to walk the red carpet with him tonight? Would he allow it to happen? Only two things would happen tonight. Either she would walk the red carpet with him, or she would not be able to attend the banquet tonight. She would be tied to the plane and go home directly. It was that simple and crude. Did he want his woman to attend the banquet as another man's female companion? Would he sit back and do nothing about it? Yun Shirshir was speechless. "You left the company and came to Milan. Why are you joining in the fun?" Mu Yaja replied. "Because there are always some people who are not self-aware and are coveting my woman. I'm worried." His straightforwardness made Yun Shirshir blush. She narrowed her eyes and smiled helplessly. "Chairman Mu, aren't you thinking too much? Who would dare to covet your woman? Are you paranoid about being persecuted?" Mu Yaja suddenly stood up and slowly approached her until he was right in front of her. He leaned forward slightly and hugged her waist, pulling her towards him. Yun Shirshir fell into his arms. He whispered in her ear, "I'll give you two choices. Either you walk the red carpet with me, or you pack your luggage and go home. You choose." "You're threatening me." Yun Shirshir gritted her teeth in anger as she glared at him. "So what?" Mu Yaja smiled provocatively and said evilly, "You want to bite me?" Yun Shirshir was so angry that her face turned red, but she heard a certain man say in a noble and cold manner, "Miss Yun, please don't be ignorant of your good fortune. There are so many female celebrities lining up to walk the red carpet with me, but I only chose you. Didn't Qin Zhou's team always want to give you exposure? Isn't this a great opportunity?" Yun Shirshir narrowed her eyes. However, Mu Yaja said slowly, "Qin Zhou asked Gu Xingze to walk the red carpet with you because he wanted to create hype. Then wouldn't I be more suitable as the target of the hype?" Yun Shirshir was speechless. Half an hour later, Yun Shirshir was done with her styling. When she walked out of the VIP room with Mu Yaja, Qin Zhou was standing outside the door, smoking. When he saw them holding each other's arms, he choked on the smoke. What was going on? "Shirshir, what's going on?" Qin Zhou was a little confused. "Tonight, she's walking the red carpet with me," Mu Yaja said coldly. As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Zhou was stunned. "What? Yun Shirshir was walking the red carpet with Boss Mu? Did the sun rise from the west?" Although Mu Yaja was the big boss of Huanyu, he had never walked the red carpet with a woman in all these years. Qin Zhou suddenly thought of the relationship between Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja. Oh, he wasn't that surprised. Chapter 1487. Qin Zhou was happy that Boss Mu was willing to walk the red carpet with Yun Shirshir. Nonsense. Why wouldn't he do something good that could increase Yun Shirshir's exposure? If Mu Yaja was to accompany Shirshir to the banquet, it would be a glorious thing. It wasn't because of anything else. It was because of Mu Yaja's status. Moreover, he had never attended such a banquet before. This was the first time and probably the only time. Just when Yun Shirshir thought that Qin Zhou was going to flip out, she saw him rubbing his hands with a smile. He looked very excited. "Shirshir, you will walk the red carpet with Chairman Mu tonight." You must perform well. With Chairman Mu around, you will definitely be on the front page tomorrow. The corners of Yun Shishir's lips twitched violently, feeling as if she had been sold off. She felt like she had the world with Mu Yaja at the banquet of Milan Fashion Week. As a guest invited by the organizer, Mu Yaja naturally had to be the finale. Thanks to him, Yun Shishir, who had been arranged to enter the venue in the first half, was now the finale. It was autumn and the weather was a little cold. Especially at night, when the cold wind blew, it was bone-piercing, and the chill was at its peak. Before they left, Qin Zhou specially gave Yun Shishir a mink cashmere jacket to protect her from the cold wind. Although the weather was very cold, the atmosphere on the red carpet was very lively. There was a heated competition of attractiveness, and the female celebrities were trying their best to show off their beauty on the red carpet, desperately trying to attract the attention of the cameras. Amidst the flashing lights, the celebrities stood in front of the cameras, constantly striking poses and posing coquettishly. They were wearing as little clothing as they could. The Bentley was parked not far from the entrance. As it was the finale, Yun Shishir couldn't enter yet. She could only sit in the car and observe the scene outside the car window. As she watched, she was speechless. Why were these female celebrities wearing so little fabric? Some even wore see-through outfits that only covered a few important parts. In the cold wind, they were still stretching their limbs and posing elegantly. It looked so cold. Yun Shishir's lips twitched. Generally speaking, the red carpet was a battlefield. The female celebrities dressed up carefully just for this moment to be the center of attention. Media from both domestic and foreign countries had gathered. The periphery of the red carpet was almost packed with people. At a glance, it was a sea of people. The only time she walked the red carpet was at Huanyu's annual cocktail party. However, the scale of the Milan Fashion Gala was incomparable to Huanyu's. It was more pretentious and had more media coverage. If she could leave her name on the red carpet, it would be more useful than shooting a few more literary films. At the same time, there was another person who was secretly competing. Han Yuyen hid in the car and refused to get out. According to the organizer's arrangement, she should have made an appearance long ago. However, she refused to get out of the car. Even though the organizer in charge of the red carpet kept urging her, she still ignored him and refused to get out of the car. Because she had not seen Yun Shishir walk the red carpet yet. Yun Shishir, this B*TCH, was just a newcomer, and she was already thinking of being the finale? Dream on. Anyway, if Yun Shishir didn't leave, she wouldn't make an appearance either. At most, they would just wait and see who could outlast the other. Chapter 1488. As Han Yuyen thought about it, she stayed in the car and did not move. It was Lin Ji's turn. She wore a splendid dress and exquisite makeup. She was beautiful and dazzling. When she walked on the red carpet, the foreign reporters did not recognize her. They were not interested in her, so they whispered to each other. The domestic media was extremely excited. They raised their cameras and took pictures of her like crazy. Lin Ji kept waving at the media. It was rare for her to walk the red carpet, so she enjoyed the attention of everyone. Even when the security guards came up to maintain order and let her in quickly, she still refused to leave the red carpet and kept blowing kisses at the media. In the end, he had no choice but to be half-dragged by the security guard. Han Yuyen sat in the car. When she saw this scene, she sneered. Country bumpkin. She had not seen the world. She did not know how this Lin Ji got into the Milan fashion show. She came here to make a fool of herself. What a disgrace. She did not want to walk with such a person and be compared to her. It would be degrading. On the list, only Mu Yaja, Yun Shishir, and Han Yuyen had not made their appearance. The person in charge of the red carpet ran over to invite Han Yuyen. Han Yuyen asked, "When is Yun Shishir leaving?" "What do you mean?" "When she leaves, I'll leave after her. How can we let her be the finale at such a big event? For this final scene, you should let someone of my level come to control the situation." The person in charge curled his lips contemptuously. This Han Yuyen was really naive. Naturally, Yun Shishir would not be the last to appear. She probably did not know that Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja were walking the red carpet together. "You're really not leaving?" The person in charge was running out of patience. In order to invite this person to the red carpet, he had gone back and forth several times. He had been polite at the beginning, but now his patience was running out. If she did not leave, he would not invite her again. However, Han Yuyen had already made up her mind. She made her stand clear and emphasized, "I want to walk the red carpet after Yun Shirshir." As soon as he finished speaking, the person in charge left helplessly. Han Yuyen closed the car door and rolled her eyes mockingly. "Yun Shirshir, you want to fight with me?" He was still too inexperienced. The red carpet was nearing its end. All of the media were eagerly waiting to find out who the big shot would be at the end of the show. The scene was still very lively. This was a rare fashion event in Italy. It was Mu Yaja's first time walking the red carpet in Milan with a female partner, and it was also Yun Shirshir's first time appearing in front of the cameras with him. She was so nervous that she almost suffocated. Yun Shirshir clasped her hand over her heart and looked at the flashing spotlights on the red carpet. For a moment, all the spotlights were on, and it was as bright as day, illuminating the silent night. Mu Yaja saw her taking deep breaths and smiled. His originally cold eyes were filled with gentleness and affection. Nervous? Yes, a little. Yun Shirshir did not mince her words. It was embarrassing to say that this was the first time she had seen such a big event. There were hundreds and thousands of reporters from different countries all over the world. Now they were all gathered together to witness this glittering fashion event. In the crowded crowd, the bodyguards were trying their best to maintain order. Chapter 1489. Mu Yaja held her hand gently and kissed her fingertips. The moment he looked down, the tenderness in his eyes seemed to melt her. The wind outside the window was bitterly cold, but at this moment, she felt a sense of warmth in her heart. "Hold my hand when you get out of the car, okay?" He tried his best to soothe her uneasy heartbeat with his gentle voice. The Bentley slowly stopped at the end of the red carpet. From the rearview mirror, Yun Shirshir could see many reporters swarming around the car door. They held up their cameras and flashed their flashlights continuously. Every one of them was trying to be the first to capture this scene before everyone else. The bodyguards immediately rushed over to divert the crowd. Unfortunately, the media was too crazy. Mu Yaja smiled, opened the door, and got out of the car. Then, under the bright flashlights, he turned around and held her hand. Yun Shirshir held his hand and slowly got out of the car. Her gorgeous cheongsam and her exquisite and perfect figure were exposed to everyone's eyes. "Oh my God, it's Yun Shirshir. Is she the newcomer who sat next to Gu Xingze at the fashion show? I remember her. Her figure in the ink painting on the red carpet was simply stunning." Yun Shirshir's appearance at tonight's fashion show was not surprising. However, what was unexpected was that her male companion on the red carpet was actually Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja. This name, even when placed in the international arena, was like thunder to one's ears. As the top celebrity in the business world, the Mu family was one of the wealthiest families in the business world. Mu Yaja was the head of the Mu family and the CEO of Dishing Financial Group. He used to be the young master of the Mu family and was now the CEO of Dishing Financial Group. His appearance on the red carpet was the biggest surprise of tonight's event. Actually, Milan's fashion show would send VIP invitations to the Mu family every spring and autumn. After Mu Yaja received the invitations, he would always throw them aside and ignore them. His appearance was a veritable VIP. Tonight, he was dressed in a handmade suit. He was tall and straight, slender and handsome. His delicate facial features softened the charm of Oriental classics and the profound mystery of European descent. His exquisite silhouette was full of heroic spirit. However, compared to the past, there was less coldness. Because of the woman beside him, there was more gentleness between his brows. When he and Yun Shirshir appeared on the red carpet, they instantly outshone the crowd. Magnesium lights flashed across the sky, causing half of the night sky to be as bright as day in an instant. "It's the CEO of Mu Group, Mu Yaja. I heard that he's a business genius. He's young and talented." The reporters were in a frenzy. It seemed that no one had expected that tonight's finale guest would be the rumored scion of a prestigious family, Mu Yaja. Wuxia held Yun Shishir's hand and walked towards the end of the red carpet. Shocking. It was really too shocking. In the past, there had been female celebrities and male guests on the red carpet together. However, it was rare for such a pair to be so good-looking. The man was so handsome. The woman was gentle and moving. A talented and beautiful couple. A golden couple. This was it. Wuxia was calm and collected. When he held Yun Shishir's hand and walked to the center of the red carpet, the reporters burst into screams. Stop! Stand where you are and take a group photo, okay? Chapter 1490. Yun Shishir, can you smile? Hearing this, Yun Shishir cooperatively revealed a charming smile, which instantly captivated the reporters in the press gallery. Even some of the international reporters were mesmerized by her smile. It was too beautiful, especially this Cheongsam. When she wore it, it was indescribably beautiful. She exuded a sense of asceticism from head to toe. Chinese elements were highly valued overseas. Many fashion weeks had Chinese-themed fashion shows. This time, the Milan Fashion Week also had a Chinese-themed show. Especially the Cheongsam, it was once the favorite of many Hollywood actresses. However, it was because of the difference in their bloodlines. How could those blonde-haired and blue-eyed foreign actresses exude the charm of the Cheongsam and its unique classical mystery? These reporters had attended so many events and could be considered to have seen countless people. However, they could not pick out a female actress who wore a Cheongsam and was as beautiful as Yun Shishir. The red high heels on her feet were based on classical elements. It matched the gown very well. Yun Shishir, look over here. A cry of surprise came from the group of reporters. Yun Shishir immediately looked in the direction of the sound, and the smile on her face became even more beautiful. The magnesium lights flashed even more fiercely. Yun Shishir and Wuxia cooperated with the media's request and got closer to each other to take a few photos. The two of them stood together and looked very compatible. The celebrities who had already walked the red carpet and were standing at the entrance of the venue could not help but whisper. Many of the celebrities who had rushed over from China to attend the Fashion Week banquet were silently guessing the relationship between Yun Shishir and Wuxia. Wuxia was the big boss of Huanyu. The huge Huanyu was just a branch of Dishing Holdings. Wuxia could be said to be the king of the entertainment empire. However, it did not decrease that he had held the hand of any female actress and attended such a banquet together. No one could tell what the relationship between the two of them was. Many people were so jealous that they gritted their teeth. Who would believe that Yun Shishir didn't have any background? She had just debuted, and she already had so many resources. She was also involved in a scandal with Gu Xingzi, and she was walking the red carpet with such a prestigious figure like Wuxia. Could it be that she was Wuxia's pet? However, Wuxia rarely had any scandals in the circle. It was rare for him to be so close to any female celebrity. Previously, Wuxia had a fiancée. However, a while ago, Wuxia held a press conference and announced that Wuxia and Mu Wanru had broken off their engagement. This news made many people jump for joy. At this moment, Yun Shishir and Wuxia had become the focus of everyone's attention. At the request of the media, Wuxia intimately hugged Yun Shishir's waist and planted a kiss between her eyebrows. The reporters all captured this sensational kiss of the century. When Han Yuyan saw this scene in the car, she suddenly couldn't sit still. She couldn't help but feel annoyed. She watched helplessly as Yun Shishir and Wuxia walked down the red carpet together. She was in a bad mood. She thought that Yun Shishir deliberately wanted to be the last to appear. She didn't expect that she was arranged to be the last to appear because she had a big shot like Wuxia. She cursed fiercely in her heart. What kind of person was Yun Shishir to be able to appear on the red carpet with Wuxia? Wuxia rarely appeared in front of the camera. Chapter 1491. Han Yuyan couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. What was the relationship between Yun Shishir and Wuxia? How could they stand so intimately together and walk the red carpet together? Wuxia was a tycoon in the business world, but he had always been handsome and aloof. There had never been any women around him. Yun Shishir was probably the first. Could it be? Han Yuyan couldn't sit still when she saw this. All of a sudden, She began to suspect that she had underestimated Yoon Shirshir. Maybe this Yoon Shirshir wasn't such a simple newcomer. Yoon Shirshir stood in the middle of the red carpet with a smile. She looked so charming, as if she was an otherworldly socialite who had walked out of an ancient painting. She also had a hint of arrogance and provocation. Her beauty was different from her usual reserved and pure look. She was flamboyant and sharp, like a blooming poppy. Even if people knew that it was highly toxic, they would rather drink poison to quench their thirst. Wuxia hugged her waist and faced the spotlights calmly. He rarely showed himself in front of the camera like this. In front of the camera, he was insufferably arrogant, exuding the extraordinary aura of a king. He had an imposing appearance and a heroic spirit. The intimidating elegance between his eyebrows made countless female celebrities fall head over heels for him and fall head over heels for him. Any one of his photos didn't even need post-processing. His handsome and exquisite looks completely crushed all the little fresh meats in the entertainment industry, and even the international male models in the fashion industry. He was too handsome. Very few people had the honor of seeing him in person. Many people were deeply shocked by his aura, so much so that for a moment, the cameraman's movements slowed down a little. Many female celebrities were so jealous that they didn't know where Yoon Shirshir got the good fortune to be able to walk the red carpet with Wuxia. Those female celebrities who were racking their brains for tomorrow's headlines were a little frustrated at this moment. With Yoon Shirshir like this, she would definitely dominate the headlines tomorrow. There was no hope for them. The domestic and foreign media took photos crazily to capture this historic scene. Shirshir, can you stay close to Chairman Mu? One more, thank you. Chairman Mu, hold her tighter. Wuxia did not give the reporters any extra chances. As soon as the time was up, he hugged Yoon Shirshir and walked towards the autograph board, causing the media to scramble to follow them. Wuxia approached the signature board and took the pen that was handed to him. He then signed his name on the blank space on the board in a flamboyant and elegant manner. The tip of his brush was handsome and powerful. His words were just like him, arrogant and flamboyant. Every stroke was full of tension. In the past, such a signature would only appear on trade contracts that were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. This was the first time it appeared in an event that had nothing to do with business. After Wuxia signed his name, he handed the pen to Yoon Shirshir. Yoon Shirshir took the pen and smiled gently. She raised her wrist and signed her name beside his. The tip of the pen was graceful and her handwriting was very beautiful. It was not inferior to his. After signing his name, Wuxia and Yoon Shirshir walked to the interview area. Qin Zhou had told them not to ask any irrelevant questions. Once they did, they would be asked to leave the banquet. The media was very respectful of the Mu group. Therefore, they did not dare to be rash. Hence, most of the questions revolved around Yoon Shirshir's speech for attending the fashion show. Chapter 1492. Do I need a reason to walk on the red carpet with anyone? Wuxia asked him back. The reporter was speechless. Such an arrogant response had a strong personal style. Wuxia had always been casual and arrogant. Hence, the reporter asked Yoon Shirshir another question. Shirshir, are you nervous about walking on the red carpet with Chairman Mu this time? Yoon Shirshir smiled and said, How could I? Before she could finish her sentence, the reporter quickly asked, Why are you in such a good mood? Yoon Shirshir chuckled and added, How could I not be nervous? The reporter was silent. Friendly laughter came from the media. Yoon Shirshir said wittily, I'm too nervous, so I'm sweating when I talk. Yoon Shirshir was already good at dealing with the media. She already knew how to use words to cleverly avoid difficult topics. Her clever on-the-spot response made the media laugh in disappointment. Ha ha ha. Shirshir is so cute. Hence, they did not make things difficult for her. They asked a few friendly questions and ended the interview. Wuxia and Yoon Shirshir walked into the venue. Qin Zhou watched their backs disappear at the end of the red carpet and sighed. He also walked into the venue. Seeing that it was about time, Han Yuan thought to herself, Now, I can finally make my appearance, right? Hence, she opened the car door and adjusted her elegant and arrogant posture. She lifted the hem of her dress and walked out of the car. At first, she thought that Yoon Shirshir deliberately wanted to be the last. Only then did she realize that it was because she was on Mu Yaja's list. She used Mu Yaja's name to delay her appearance. However, this was good. At least she was the real last. Thinking of this, Han Yuyan's face showed a proud smile. She lifted the hem of her dress and walked gracefully to the red carpet. However, when she walked to the red carpet, she saw that the people in the venue were busy closing the red carpet. The corner of Han Yuyan's mouth twitched, but she still maintained her elegant smile. She signaled her assistant with her eyes. The assistant immediately ran forward and said in fluent English, "Wait, there's still an artist who hasn't left." "What? Our artist, Han Yuyan, hasn't walked the red carpet yet. Let's wrap it up later. It's time." That person snorted rudely and ignored her, continuing with the movement of his hands. Han Yuyan could no longer maintain the elegant smile on her face, and her face turned pale. She quickly stepped forward and said condescendingly, "What time is it now? You're already rolling the red carpet? That's too much. I haven't left yet." The assistant translated her words for her. The man looked at her from head to toe and said expressionlessly, "We're just following orders. The last couple has already walked the red carpet. Moreover, it's time. The banquet is about to begin. Call the person in charge here." "I'll talk to him," Han Yuyan said coldly. The man muttered in Italian, then picked up the headset and called the person in charge. The person in charge hurried over. When he saw Han Yuyan, his face turned cold. "What's going on?" Han Yuyan snorted and pointed arrogantly at the assistants in charge of closing the red carpet. She said angrily, "What are they doing? I haven't walked the red carpet yet, and they're already rolling it up. That's too much. Please give me an explanation." Her tone was arrogant and arrogant. Chapter 1493. The person in charge was surprised, and his tone was cold. "Time's up, so they're starting to pack up the red carpet. There's nothing wrong with them doing that." Han Yuyan almost flew into a rage when she heard that. She tried hard to calm herself down and forced a smile, pretending to be calm. "I haven't left yet." It was just a few words, but she said it while smiling and gritting her teeth. The person in charge asked coldly, "What does that have to do with me?" Han Yuyan was stunned. "You didn't want to leave when I asked you to. Now that time's up, you won't have the chance to leave even if you want to. Wait for the next time." The person in charge said those words casually, but what he meant was that Han Yuyan should pack up and leave, and walk the red carpet again next time. Han Yuyan's face was completely flushed. She was extremely embarrassed. She suddenly lost her composure and said unreasonably, "No way! You can't do that. Roll out the red carpet for me again. Let me finish walking the red carpet. There's a limit to acting like a big shot. Who do you think you are? You're just an artist. Do you want everyone to wait for you?" The person in charge rolled his eyes at her. "Sorry, the banquet has started. I asked you to walk the red carpet, but you didn't want to. Who do you think you are? How dare you dream of being the finale after Mr. Mu? Haha." He sneered, turned around, and continued to order people to pack up the red carpet. Han Yuyan held onto her fur coat. Her eyes were red as she glared at them. She bit her red lips. She felt wronged, but there was nothing she could do. She could only watch as they packed up the red carpet and removed it. The reporters rushed into the venue and immediately erected a barrier. Now she couldn't even enter the venue. Han Yuyan thought about the fashion banquet she had been looking forward to for so long. Now she was blocked outside the door, standing alone in the cold wind. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She was full of grievances. She thought about how Yoon Shirshir walked the red carpet in glory, but she didn't even have the right to walk the red carpet. Just thinking about it made her heart ache. Her eyes turned red. No matter how hard she tried to hold it in, she couldn't stop her tears from flowing. Her assistant scolded her from the side. "What kind of attitude is that? Seriously, our Yuyan hasn't even walked the red carpet yet, and she's already taken it away. She doesn't know how to respect others at all. It would have been better if she hadn't said anything." The moment she did, Han Yuyan felt even more aggrieved and had nowhere to vent. Her tears flowed even more violently. She couldn't help but say, "Shut up." After saying that, she went back to the car angrily. As soon as she got into the car, Han Yuyan broke down and burst into tears. There was nothing more miserable than rushing to Fashion Week, only to be blocked outside the door. At the same time, he felt so humiliated. She didn't know if her embarrassing moment had been captured by the domestic reporters. She thought about how the local reporters would write about her if they found out that, because she had acted like a big shot, she had suffered a double loss and couldn't even attend the banquet. The more Han Yuyan thought about it, the more aggrieved she felt. She covered her face and cried. In the venue, famous people gathered and the stars shone brightly. Wuxia hugged Yun Shishir and took the wine glasses. The waiter poured red wine for them. He turned around and raised the wine glass, indicating to her. Yun Shishir glanced at him and smiled shyly. She mumbled, "I can't really drink. I'm afraid I'll get drunk." "What's there to be afraid of? I'm here." Chapter 1494. Wuxia suddenly leaned close to her ear. "Also, I like how you look when you're drunk." She was delicate and cute, and the 2 patches of red on her cheeks were especially charming. He loved this beautiful and charming appearance. Yun Shishir pursed her lips and pretended to pout coquettishly as she glared at him. Wuxia clinked his wine glass against hers and drank it in one gulp. He could hold his liquor very well. In the past, when negotiating business, the wine table was undoubtedly a smokeless battlefield. Alcohol tolerance symbolized the confidence of the negotiation. Often, the success of the transaction could not be separated from the boost of alcohol tolerance. Yun Shishir was still afraid of getting drunk, so she took a small sip. The wine-red wine stained her delicate lips, and it was incomparably beautiful. Wuxia glanced at it, and his heart was slightly moved. If they weren't in a public place, he really couldn't help but lower his head and lick the beautiful wine on her lips. The female celebrities present were all envious and jealous. They couldn't wait to kick Yun Shishir away. This Yun Shishir was too much of an eyesore. It wasn't just the domestic artistes. Some international celebrities were also a little jealous. Among them was Princess Charlotte of the Morocco royal family. As a member of the Morocco royal family, Princess Charlotte naturally received a VIP invitation to Milan Fashion Week. She didn't expect Wuxia to also come. She had met him once at the Morocco royal family's banquet. Under the arrangement of Duke Hanst, he danced with her. Charlotte thought that this man was quite interesting. During the dance, she could see that he was absent-minded and uninterested, as if he was very reluctant to dance with her. He made a few wrong steps and stepped on her a few times. Charlotte was displeased, but at the same time he left a deep impression on her. There were very few men who didn't like her. As the princess of the Morocco royal family, not only was she rich, but she was also beautiful and had a noble temperament. There were countless nobles who flocked to her like a flock of ducks, not to mention those commoners. This was the first time she had seen a man with a cold face in front of her. There was no change in his expression, nor was there a trace of reverence or submission. After the dance, he left the dance floor in a hurry and did not linger. Charlotte could not help but be a little interested in him. This man is very interesting. Moreover, his noble and arrogant temperament was very attractive to her. She was tired of those men who fawned over her in every possible way. She was even more tired of those who treated her as if she was a high and mighty queen. Towards Wuxia's cold and arrogant temperament, she was very attracted to him. After that day, through Duke Hanst, she expressed her admiration for Wuxia to the Mu group, hoping to meet him. Charlotte's view on love was very straightforward. Western culture had been implanted in her bones since she was young. To her, in love, there was no such thing as who took the initiative or who was passive. If she liked someone, she would take the initiative to pursue him. Thus, she picked up a glass of red wine from the waiter's tray and walked towards Wuxia. Wuxia was standing in front of the dining table with Yun Shishir in his arms, gently feeding her cake. Yun Shishir said angrily, "I don't need you to feed me. You don't like me feeding you? There are so many people watching. It's not good. Don't worry about others." Wuxia did not allow her to say anything. The venue was divided into a VIP area and a non-VIP area. Chapter 1495. Hence, he felt that he had nothing to fear. However, Yun Shirshir could feel the sharp swords directed at her from all directions. So many pairs of eyes were staring at her with hatred. She felt uncomfortable all over. Mu Yaja ordered, "Open your mouth." Yun Shirshir was forced to open her mouth and was fed a mouthful of the tiramisu cake. It's so sweet." She raised her eyebrows in surprise. Mu Yaja saw that she seemed to like it very much and also took a bite. "Yes, it's very sweet." Qin Zhou, who was watching from the side, covered his face. "Oh please, what was going on with these two? Shirshir, could you at least learn from Lin Ji?" After entering the VIP area, it was as if you were on a spiral motor, constantly traveling among the famous celebrities to make your presence known. Looking at these two, they did not look at anything else after entering the venue. They only focused on tasting the delicious food at the dining table. When Qin Zhou saw Yun Shirshir holding the cake and savoring it, he was especially angry that she did not fight for it. He expected better from her. The Fashion Week Gala was a gathering of many international celebrities, including the royal family, political leaders, big-name buyers, A-list celebrities, and internationally renowned directors and producers. Any one of them had many dazzling titles, and they were all resources that could only be found by chance. However, Yun Shirshir seemed to be possessed. She only focused on the delicious food and did not pay attention to anything else. Qin Zhou was so angry that he stomped his feet. Why was this child so thoughtless? But on second thought, forget it. Let her be. Although this child was a little silly, fortune favors fools. Although she did not know how to fight for resources, the person standing next to her was the best resource. Mu Yaja. If he said that he wanted to help Yun Shirshir rise to the top, Yun Shirshir would definitely be smashed by all kinds of big-name resources that would fall from the sky. Qin Zhou snorted and decided to ignore her. Hence, he went all over the venue to look for Gu Xingze. He did not seem to have seen Gu Xingze since he walked on the red carpet. Could it be that he was too depressed and didn't come? 2 hours ago, Gu Xingze arrived at the Louis Vuitton studio with a bouquet of lilies in his hands. According to the agreement, Yun Shirshir was supposed to be his female companion on the red carpet, so he arrived as promised. Before that, he had specially bought a bouquet of flowers, intending to give her a surprise. He remembered that Shirshir liked flowers in his heart. However, when they arrived at the studio, Qin Zhou was about to leave, but Yun Shirshir was nowhere to be seen. He smelled it, but Qin Zhou stammered, saying that Yun Shirshir had already left. Gu Xingze felt a little strange. He asked, "Didn't we agree to walk the red carpet together tonight?" Qin Zhou, however, hinted that Shirshir had been taken away by Mu Yaja. Tonight, she would be walking the red carpet with Mu Yaja. The moment he finished speaking, Gu Xingze's face darkened and his eyes turned gray. He looked very disappointed. Qin Zhou was very worried. Gu Xingze asked expressionlessly, "When did Mu Yaja arrive?" "I'm not sure." "He took Shirshir away?" "Yes." Qin Zhou saw this and could not help but say, "Xingze, give up." Gu Xingze looked up at him in confusion. "Give up? I can tell that you like Shirshir a lot, right?" Qin Zhou probed carefully, afraid that he would hurt him. Chapter 1496. Do you need to hide it in front of me? You clearly like her a lot, don't you? Qin Zhou's tone became a little harsh. Gu Xingze, however, was distraught. "I've already said it. I didn't." "If you didn't, would you have accepted the job for the love diary?" Qin Zhou suddenly questioned him sternly. Gu Xingze was stunned. "You accepted this job because you subconsciously wanted to use this reality show, even if it's fake or fictional, to be by Shirshir's side as her boyfriend, right?" Qin Zhou was aggressive, but Gu Xingze remained silent and did not say a word. "You don't have to lie to yourself anymore. Okay? You're in love with Shirshir, so why don't you dare to admit it? But as a friend of many years, I can only advise you to give up. It's impossible between you and her. I can tell that Mu Yaja cares a lot about her, and he values her a lot. You have no chance at all." Gu Xingze still did not say a word. Qin Zhou was also furious. In fact, He had long seen through Xingza's subconscious feelings for Yun Shirshir. If it was in the past, Xingza would never have accepted a reality show like The Love Diary, let alone let any female celebrity consume his popularity. Although it was his idea to use Gu Xingza's fame to create hype, it was his idea. But Xingza was used to having his own principles. Qin Zhou watched that episode. Gu Xingza looked at Yun Shirshir with doting eyes. Even through the screen, Qin Zhou could deeply feel Gu Xingza's deep feelings for Yun Shirshir. Even if it was just a show, it would be good. Even if it was just a show, it would be good. To be able to date, hug, and hold hands with the person he loved as a couple. These wishes that could not be fulfilled in reality could be fulfilled in the show. This was probably the main reason why Xingza accepted this show. Think about what I've said. After saying this, Qin Zhou left him behind and left. However, until now, he still hadn't seen him. Could it be that this fellow didn't come? Qin Zhou was slightly annoyed. He seemed to have been too harsh with his words earlier. He was worried that he might have hurt him. However, if he didn't say that, he might not be able to clearly understand how ridiculous he was. Shirshir clearly did not belong to him. This relationship couldn't be forced, so why did he have to be so stubborn? Thinking of this, Qin Zhou left the venue and headed to the hotel where Gu Xingza was staying. Yun Shirshir stood in front of the dining table and felt that the food on the table was so sumptuous and tempting that it was too much for her eyes to take in. This one was delicious, and that one looked delicious as well. Yun Shirshir was drooling. She had not eaten dinner. Now was the time of famine. Greedy little cat. Mu Yaja looked at her greedy appearance and could not help but be cold. Seeing the cream on the corner of her mouth, he couldn't help but reach out to wipe it away. Miss Yun, please pay attention to your table manners. He teased her on purpose. Yun Shirshir snorted. What's there to be afraid of? As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly caught a glimpse of a graceful figure walking in her direction from the corner of her eye. An elegant woman in a gorgeous gown was holding a wine glass in one hand and looking behind her. Her exquisitely made-up face seemed to be full of ambition. Yun Shirshir was stunned and focused on her. However, she saw that she had already walked in front of her and stopped in her tracks. Yun Shirshir frowned in surprise and confusion. Chapter 1497. Lowly commoner, move aside. Her arrogant behavior had undoubtedly infuriated Yun Shirshir. She asked in return, "Who are you? Do I know you? Who is this woman? Why is she so arrogant?" They walked in front of her for no reason, and one by one, they arrogantly asked her to make way for them. Mu Yaja heard the commotion and turned around. He caught a glimpse of a gorgeous figure from the corner of his eye. He was slightly stunned and instantly frowned. "What are you doing?" She walked to Yun Shirshir's side and protected her in her arms. She glared at Charlot with a dignified expression. When Charlot saw Mu Yaja, the arrogant expression on her face instantly faded and was replaced by a light and charming smile. She went to his side and held his arm as if there was no one else around. She looked very intimate. "Arthur, I've finally caught you this time, haven't I?" "It's me, Charlot. We even danced together some time ago. Do you remember me?" Charlot said in fluent French. She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder intimately. Yun Shirshir was stunned. She was petrified and looked at the scene in front of her in disbelief. She looked up and glanced at Mu Yaja's gloomy face again. She finally understood what was going on. Her heart settled down. It turned out that another rotten peach blossom had appeared. She simply ignored it and left it to Mu Yaja to solve it himself. She turned around and continued to choose her favorite desserts. Mu Yaja could not help but feel frustrated. He wanted to push her away, but Charlot held on to him tightly and did not give him a chance to do so. It also seemed that she was doing this intentionally for Yun Shirshir to see. She wanted her to see how intimate she was with this man. However, when Charlot looked at Yun Shirshir smugly, she saw that she was holding the plate calmly and did not look over. She was calmly tasting the desserts. Charlot's face instantly darkened. This woman did not seem to care about her at all. Mu Yaja looked at her with a headache. This woman was the mess Mu Linfeng had thrown to him. Princess Charlotte was a member of Morocco's royal family. Princess Charlotte was the beloved daughter of Princess Caitlin of Morocco. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also very wealthy. As one of the future heirs of the royal family, there were countless admirers who flocked to him. The Mu family had many dealings with the Morocco royal family, so Mu Linfeng had high hopes for Mu Yaja and hoped that he could marry Princess Charlotte. Naturally, Mu Yaja was well aware of his uncle's thoughts. That was the reason why he had asked him to leave the country. Mu Yaja was filled with jealousy and dissatisfaction when he arranged for the princess to be with him. If the Mu group could form a marriage alliance with the Morocco royal family, the benefits would be unimaginable. It would be a great help to the Mu group. However, Mu Yaja was especially disdainful of this. What he hated the most was using marriage as a bargaining chip between business and politics. Moreover, since he already had a woman in his heart, he would not spare another glance at other women. Charlotte could not help but feel disappointed when she saw his cold expression. She raised her goblet and gestured to him. "Arthur, let's have a drink, shall we?" "Not interested." Mu Yaja's tone was still indifferent. He pushed her away expressionlessly, appearing especially cold. Chapter 1498. She had always been confident and arrogant. She had countless fans, and the number of people who adored her was as many as the carps in the river. But she was unable to attract this man's gaze. This was a huge blow to her. She didn't believe it. She didn't believe that she couldn't conquer this man. Charlotte appeared in front of her in a flash and pouted coquettishly. "Hey, what do you mean he's not interested? Make yourself clear," she questioned angrily. Yun Shirshir took a sip of the red wine and glanced at Charlotte, reminding her kindly, "What he means is that he's not interested in having a drink with you." When Mu Yaja heard this, he was stunned and looked at her in shock. He thought that this woman would be like her usual self, hiding at one side like a coward and ignoring them. Or maybe she would start to let her imagination run wild and be overly suspicious. He didn't expect that she would be so daring to stand out and go against Charlotte. He couldn't help but be surprised at this. Charlotte's attention was attracted by her words. Yun Shirshir spoke in French with perfect pronunciation. Although she wasn't fluent, it was very standard and every word was enunciated accurately. Charlotte was a little surprised, but at the same time, she couldn't help but glare fiercely in her direction. She arrogantly scolded. "It's not your turn to butt in here, you lowly commoner. Shut up." "Hey, you're wrongly accusing me." Yun Shirshir blinked her eyes innocently and guided her patiently. "I'm kindly reminding you, but you're actually scolding me as a lowly commoner." Charlotte didn't understand. "Kindly reminding me?" "Yes, because you don't understand human language, right? I'm kindly translating for you." Yun Shirshir smiled elegantly but suddenly spat out a sentence that was disgusting to death. Charlotte immediately understood the mockery in her words and was instantly angered to the point of suffering internal injuries. Even Mu Yaja couldn't help but curl the corners of his lips. This woman was too cute. She was usually docile and quiet, obedient and sweet. But once she revealed her edge, she was like a cat with sharp claws and teeth. She could actually smile and say such vicious words. It seemed that he had learned a lot from following Qin Zhou. Charlotte was furious. However, even if she was furious, she had to pay attention to her public image in a public place. She had no choice but to suppress the anger in her heart and try her best to maintain the noble and elegant expression on her face. She sneered disdainfully. "Shut up. You have no right to speak here. Get the hell away from him. You don't deserve to stand beside him. You're such an eyesore." Yun Shirshir, on the other hand, was neither shocked nor angry. With a light smile on her face, she said, "Your Highness, you seem to be mistaken about something. Would you please examine the situation you are in? This is Milan, Italy, not Monaco, okay? Now that we're in Italy, can you please put away that disgusting princess act?" "You?" Charlotte was rendered speechless. She could only stare at her with her thick eyeshadow, wishing she could kill her with her gaze. Yun Shirshir glanced at her and smiled. "Don't stare at me with your dead fish eyes. Damn lowly commoner. You." Charlotte was at a loss for words. She was so angry that she clenched her fists. Her meticulously done nails were almost embedded in her palms. She glared at her fiercely. Okay, I won't play with you anymore. Chapter 1499. Charlotte was left standing at the same spot, glaring angrily at him. When they reached a corner, Wuxia could not help but tease her. Little thing, I didn't expect you to have such a fierce mouth. As he spoke, he reached out and lightly scratched the bridge of her nose. Who asked her to have such an arrogant attitude? Does she really think that I'm a pushover? Humph. Yun Shirshir curled her lips coquettishly, and there was a hint of playfulness in her eyes. Wuxia could not help but feel a little curious. How did you know her identity? He had never mentioned Charlotte's identity in front of her. Yun Shirshir looked up and glanced at him. Then, she said, firstly, from the way she spoke, she was so arrogant. Her every movement had a strong aristocratic accent. It seems like she's either rich or noble. As for the second one, from the way she spoke French with a unique accent, so I guessed her identity. The official language of the Morocco royal family was French. Looking at her haughty, princess-like appearance, she vaguely guessed her identity. Carefully looking at her face, she remembered that she had seen her on TV before. When the Morocco royal family crowned Princess Charlotte, there were related reports in the country. She happened to see it. Wuxia smiled. So you're not stupid. Hey, I'm very smart, okay? Yun Shirshir retorted. When I was in school, I was at least a top student. Otherwise, how could you be so smart? Yu is so smart. Didn't he inherit my genes? Then why can't Xiao Yichen solve a simple math problem? Because he inherited your stupidity. Yun Shirshir was choked by his words, but she was extremely disdainful of his words. She snorted coldly. Mr. Mu, you seem to have overlooked a problem. What? A child's innate genes are important, but their education is also very important. Look, Xiao Yichen isn't proficient in his studies at all under your tutelage. Look at Yu. Look at how smart and adorable she is under my careful guidance. Yun Shirshir smugly glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. Obviously, he was determined to go against him. You're full of crooked arguments, commented Wuxia bluntly. What nonsense. This is clearly the truth, okay? Yun Shirshir rebuked him. I'm not going to argue with you. Wuxia curled his lips and smiled. He leaned down and whispered in her ear. Were you jealous just now? As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Shirshir's face suddenly turned red. When Wuxia saw this, the smile in his eyes deepened. She seemed to be a woman who got shy easily. He especially liked how she looked when she was shy. Her face would always turn red, and she would lower her head and frown slightly. Her coquettish face would look as if she wanted to say something. She would stare at him shyly and aggrievedly. She stared at a certain part of his heart. She stared at him until his body was slightly hot. He knew that his body was hot not because of the alcohol, but because deep within his body he was reacting to her. Wuxia hugged her and suddenly confined her to the wall in a secluded corner. He placed his arms on her shoulders and looked down at her. Answer me. Were you jealous just now? When she was arguing with Charlotte, her tone was tough. There was a different sharpness about her that was on the verge of bursting out. Chapter 1500. Intentionally or unintentionally, she avoided this topic. She turned her face to one side, obviously avoiding his probing gaze. Even she didn't know why she had been so impulsive to argue with Charlotte just now. In fact, she couldn't afford to offend a noble like Charlotte. Alas, she could not bear to watch her entanglement with Wuxia in every possible way. She was disgusted. So there was that scene just now. Wuxia saw the fear in her eyes. He lowered his head a little unhappily and pecked the corner of her lips with a gentle bite, as if he was coercing her. Say it. His tone was domineering and irresistible. He was eager to hear the answer from her mouth. Between them, she had always maintained an ambiguous attitude and rarely expressed her feelings for him directly. Just now, she was the most domineering she had ever been. But it was for him. This knowledge made him feel complacent. This woman, who had always seemed to be weak and boneless, actually stretched out her sharp claws for him one day. This made him a little wild with joy. Yun Shirshir pushed him. "Hey, you don't be like this. We're still at the venue. Answer my question." Mu Yaja was extremely willful and domineering. He didn't allow her to escape. Yun Shirshir lowered her face. At this ambiguous moment, the phone rang at the wrong time. The ringtone came from Mu Yaja. He seemed to be indifferent to the irritating ringtone. Instead, he was a little annoyed by this untimely disturbance. Yun Shirshir said, "Your phone is ringing. Don't worry about it. Hey, at least care about it. What if it's something important?" Yun Shirshir said seriously. Because of her, Mu Yaja picked up the phone with an unhappy expression. He glanced at the screen and saw that the call was from Mui Chen. His expression softened a little and he picked up the phone. "Hello, Daddy." This call, the little guy's voice was especially excited and loud. "Daddy, I saw Mommy on TV." These words that came out of nowhere caused Mu Yaja to frown involuntarily. Television, NN, Mila Fashion Week report. "Mui Chen, you idiot. It's Milan Fashion Week. Not Mila." Not far away, Yu's stern voice was heard correcting her. "All right, it was Milan Fashion Week. Mommy is wearing such a beautiful dress. She's so beautiful, just like a fairy." Xiao Chen finished speaking excitedly. In an instant, his voice sounded strangely aggrieved. "What a pity. I didn't see it with my own eyes. I can only watch Mommy on the TV." Mu Yaja. Yun Shirshir could vaguely hear Xiao Chen's voice, but she couldn't make out what Xiao Chen was saying. She stared wide-eyed at Mu Yaja's expression. Mu Yaja said, "Little idiot, haven't you gone to bed yet?" "Daddy, you're the idiot. It's already noon here." Xiao Chen snorted. Mu Yaja broke out in cold sweat. He had forgotten that there was a time difference between capital city and Milan. It was 9 o'clock in the evening in Milan, and 2 o'clock in the afternoon in capital city. "Daddy, I miss Mommy so much. When is Mommy coming back?" Mu Chen's weak voice came from the other end. It sounded inexplicably sad, as if he was about to cry. Chapter 1501. Alive? Mu Yaja couldn't help but feel disappointed by the little boy's choice of words. How could he describe it like that? The two little boys had indeed missed their mother dearly these few days. Yun Shirshir could still hear Mu Chen's heartbroken complaints through the phone. "I miss Mommy so much." She heard these words clearly. Hearing Mu Chen's longing, Yun Shirshir's eyes reddened. Yun Shirshir had a few days of intense work. Once she was done with the recording of the love diary, she was dragged to the recording studio by her manager for a voiceover session. Just as she was done with the voiceover session, before she could even step into the house, she was dragged onto a private plane to Milan by her manager. She counted the days and realized that she hadn't seen the two little lads for about half a month. Yun Shirshir missed them dearly. She snatched the phone from Mu Yaja's hand. "Xiao Chen." The moment she spoke, there was a moment of dead silence on the other end. Then, Xiao Chen's ecstatic voice came through. "Mommy! Mommy!" His voice was extremely loud and clear. The child's tender voice was filled with 4 years of experience. Yun Shirshir's eyes reddened. "Xiao Chen, I'm so sorry. I haven't been able to tell you and you bedtime stories for the past few days. Mommy misses you so much." Xiao Chen asked softly. "Mommy, when are you coming back?" His helpless question hit the softest spot in Yun Shirshir's heart. Her heart tightened and she blurted out instinctively, "I'll be back tomorrow." Just as she finished speaking, she suddenly remembered that there were a few shows tomorrow. Qin Zhou had repeatedly emphasized that these shows were very important and couldn't be missed. However, she was worried about the two little boys at home. She missed them dearly. She had no choice. The two little lads were much more important than work. Once he heard that Yun Shirshir would be back tomorrow, Xiao Chen was overjoyed. He held the phone and jumped up and down excitedly. "Awesome! Awesome! Mommy, what time will you be home tomorrow?" "I haven't booked the plane ticket yet, so I don't know." "Oh, I see." In an instant, Xiao Chen's tone turned gloomy. He was indescribably disappointed. Yoon Shirshir couldn't bear it and immediately said, I'll definitely rush back as soon as possible. Okay? Okay. Xiao Yichen's voice was filled with vitality when he heard her promise. When mommy isn't here, you must take good care of your little brother. Yoon Shirshir stared at her seriously. Little Yichen hummed in acknowledgement before patting his chest in assurance. My dearest mommy, don't worry. I took good care of you. Okay. Be good. Stay at home and wait for mommy to come back. All right. Xiao Yichen promised again and again. After hanging up the phone, Yoon Shirshir's eyes were empty. She thought about how Qin Zhou would coldly reject her when she mentioned that she wanted to return home early. Just thinking about it gave her a headache. Is it too late to book the plane ticket now? There's no need to book the plane ticket. Oh. Yoon Shirshir looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? Mu Yaja said. I have a private jet. Yoon Shirshir was speechless. Mu Yaja said. We'll fly directly to the capital tomorrow. Yoon Shirshir suddenly blurted out a very popular teasing phrase on the internet. Tycoon, do you lack accessories on your thigh? Mu Yaja smiled evilly. He grabbed her chin and kissed her flirtatiously. No, I need someone to warm my bed. Yoon Shirshir was speechless. Chapter 1502. On the other side, Mu Yichen hung up the phone and said to Yu proudly, Yu, mommy is coming home tomorrow. Yu, who was standing at the side, glared at him resentfully, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Little Yichen could not help shrinking his neck under his father's stare. Licking his lips, he fearfully asked, Why are you staring at me like that? What do you think? Yu crossed his arms and stared at him coldly. I'll take good care of my brother. Mu Yichen, aren't you embarrassed to say that? Mu Yichen blinked innocently as Yu stood in front of him and counted with his fingers expressionlessly. I washed your clothes, cooked your meals, told you bedtime stories every night and woke you up. I made noodles for you in the middle of the night when you were hungry. Mu Yichen, who's taking care of who? The more he spoke, the angrier he got. When his mother was not at home, he had to take on the role of a father and a mother at home. He wished he could have 3 heads and 6 arms to take care of Mu Yichen. In the end, the lad was heartless. He turned around and asked for a reward from his mother. He even promised her that he would take good care of his younger brother. Who's taking care of who? Mu Yichen felt guilty. He looked at him timidly and begged, Yu, brother was wrong. Don't be angry. Humph. Yu snorted coldly and put the laundry basket aside. He sat on the sofa angrily and crossed his arms. It was obvious that he was furious. Mu Yichen went up to him in a fawning manner. Just as he was about to reach out to hold his brother's hand, the latter unceremoniously slapped his hand away and ignored him. Humph, go away. Wasn't it too late to try to please him now? Yu, don't be angry. You don't look good when you're angry. Look at your face. It's wrinkled like an old man. Yu looks best when you're not angry. Mu Yichen coaxed him. However, his words only added fuel to the fire. Like an old man. Yu glared at him and said proudly, You're the old man. Yu, don't be angry. Brother doesn't know how to talk. Yu was speechless. He was completely speechless at his stupid brother. Idiot. Idiot. He's so stupid. Yu crossed his arms and turned his head to the side in a fit of anger. These days, he was like a full-time nanny, taking care of his stupid brother. She didn't eat well, was picky about what she wore, was naughty, broke several vases, and even shamelessly asked for a reward from mommy. Just thinking about it made him angry. Mu Yichen sized him up carefully and said, Yu, don't be angry. Yu glanced at him coldly from the corner of his eyes. At this moment, the little lad was sitting on the sofa with his legs elegantly crossed and his arms crossed. His arrogant demeanor made him look like an elegant queen who was unapproachable. Mu Yichen tentatively sat beside him and reached out to carefully massage his shoulders. Yu, be good. Yu, be good. Don't be angry anymore. Yu rolled his eyes in his heart. Was this idiot treating him like a 3-year-old child? However, Mu Yichen's flattery was still effective. Yu suddenly said, Be gentle. "Oh, okay." Mui Chen obeyed his orders obediently. He loosened his grip a little as he carefully massaged his son's shoulders and coaxed him sweetly. "Yu's worked hard. Brother will massage your shoulders." Chapter 1503. While she was enjoying the massage, she also reminded him to control his strength from time to time. Xiao Yichen smiled apologetically and had a lot of fun massaging her. "Yu, is it comfortable?" It's just SOSO." Yu commented coldly without even lifting her eyelids. Little Yichen let out a defeated whimper and continued to work hard on the massage. "Idiot. Be gentler. Here, be a little heavier." It's comfortable." Xiao Yichen smiled proudly. His silly face was extremely cute. Yu raised the corners of her eyes and glanced at him lazily from the corner of her eyes. She instructed, "You're done massaging. Go and dry the clothes." Xiao Yichen's face fell and he nodded unwillingly. Then he carried the laundry basket and walked to the balcony with a sad face. Yu's eyes curved into crescents. She snickered as she looked at Xiao Yichen's dejected back. A smug look appeared on her face. This guy can be quite cute sometimes. Qin Zhou rushed to the hotel Gu Xingze was staying at and knocked on the door. No one responded for a long time. He raised his eyebrows suspiciously and returned to his room. Qin Zhou's suite was right next to Gu Xingze's. He arranged for Yun Shishir to stay in the same hotel as Gu Xingze on this trip to Milan. At the same time, he prepared a room key for both of them just in case. When he returned to his room, he found a spare room key for Gu Xingze's room. He used the room key and successfully entered the room. However, what he saw was a dark room. He turned on the lights in the hall and closed the door. When he passed by the bathroom, he heard the sound of water flowing from the bathroom. He was shocked. He pushed open the unlocked door and rushed in. The sound of water came from the bathtub. He walked to the bathtub. There was no one in the bathtub, but it was filled with water. The shower head was not turned off and water kept flowing. The water in the bathtub kept overflowing and covered the floor. As soon as he entered, his shoes became wet. Gu Xingze must have forgotten to turn off the shower head after showering. It seemed that he did not attend the banquet tonight and went straight back to the hotel. Qin Zhou frowned and turned off the water. If he did not check in time, he did not know when to see if the water would come flooding. Time to check. He walked into the bedroom and saw to the balconies open. The bedroom was a large suite, and the balcony was an open-air observation deck surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows. The evening breeze poured in through the windows, making the curtains dance. The room was cold to the room. To the balcony, to the balcony, to the balcony. Gu Xingze, dressed in a black bathrobe, was leaning lazily on the sofa with his head lowered. In the darkness, she could not see his face clearly, but she could still feel the deep aura emanating from him. He seemed to be a little tired. Qin Zhou's gaze fell on his hand. Between his fingers was a cigarette that was about to burn out. There was an ashtray on the low table next to him. The ashtray was full of cigarette butts. Qin Zhou was stunned. In his impression, Gu Xingze seldom smoked. He was not addicted to smoking. He only smoked a few cigarettes to refresh himself when he stayed up late to memorize the script. However, it was rare for him to smoke so fiercely. Qin Zhou's heart skipped a beat. Gu Xingze seemed to be lost in thought and did not notice his presence. Chapter 1504. Gu Xingze raised his hand and took another deep puff of the cigarette. However, this mouthful, perhaps because he inhaled too quickly, he choked fiercely. He suddenly covered his face and let out a heart-wrenching cough. Cough, cough, cough. It was heart-wrenching. Amidst his violent coughing, his fingers loosened and the cigarette fell on the carpet. The smell of burnt carpet instantly filled the air. Qin Zhou frowned, quickly turned on the floor lamp, and walked over. Gu Xingze's wet hair was exposed under the light. He looked up in shock. When he saw Qin Zhou, his eyes dimmed slightly. Qin Zhou walked to his side and sat down. He looked at him angrily, only to see that his body was dripping wet, especially his hair. It was as if he had just been fished out of a bathtub. He was only wearing a bathrobe, and his hair was dripping wet. It was as if he hadn't wiped it, and the ends of his hair were still dripping with water. Qin Zhou's heart ached when he saw this. How did this man in front of him become so decadent? In the past, Gu Xingze had always been high and mighty. He was cold, arrogant, and inviolable, like a king. He would never show such a weak side. Qin Zhou could not help but feel heartbroken. At the same time, he could not understand. Xingze, how did you become like this? Ever since he terminated his contract with Gu Xingze and became Yun Shishi's manager, Gu Xingze did not hire another manager. He had his own studio. Everything in his acting career was managed by his team. Gu Xingze opened his eyes lazily and did not say a word. He grabbed the cigarette box on the table and put a cigarette in his mouth. He was about to light it. Qin Zhou quickly snatched the cigarette from his mouth and said angrily, "How many cigarettes have you smoked? Why are you still smoking?" As he spoke, he glanced at the ashtray. The ashtray was full of cigarette butts. How many cigarettes had this guy smoked without saying a word? Qin Zhou said angrily, "Your new album will start recording soon. Don't you want your voice anymore?" Gu Xingze said in a low voice, "Give it to me. Don't smoke anymore." Qin Zhou ordered and confiscated the cigarette box. Gu Xingze watched his movements, but did not stop him too forcefully. He closed his eyes and let his body sink into the sofa, but his face was filled with unconcealable loneliness. Qin Zhou sat down across from him and remained silent for a long time. After what seemed like a century of dead silence, Gu Xingze suddenly spoke slowly. "What should I do if I fall in love with someone I shouldn't?" Perhaps it was because of the cigarette, but his voice was a little hoarse and obscure. It was low and broken, revealing a little powerlessness and confusion. Qin Zhou had never seen him so fragile. He moved his lips and took a deep look at Gu Xingze, but said almost cruelly, "Then don't love." Gu Xingze was confused. Qin Zhou forced himself to say coldly and heartlessly, "Don't think about it, don't think about it, don't look at it, and don't have any wild hopes." Gu Xingze stopped talking and looked down expressionlessly. Qin Zhou said coldly, "Cut off all the feelings you shouldn't have." "Cut off all the feelings?" Gu Xingze said indifferently, "If it's that simple, it's not a bad thing." Qin Zhou was speechless. Gu Xingze said unwillingly, "But I want her." "Her? Is it Shishi?" Qin Zhou held his forehead helplessly. "There are so many women you don't want. Why her?" "Feeling." Gu Xingze uttered these two words after a long pause. Chapter 1505. However, Qin Zhou was puzzled. He really couldn't understand why Xingze was so infatuated with Yun Shishi. "How do you feel?" Qin Zhou asked. Xingze narrowed his eyes as if he was smiling. "She gives me a warm feeling." "Warm? Living with her will definitely make you feel at home." Gu Xingze paused and said, "What I want. No one can give me except her. Don't let your imagination run wild. You'll meet someone more suitable." Qin Zhou stood up and held his shoulders. He advised in a low voice, "Actually, Xingze, you deserve to meet someone more suitable. All this time, you've been too closed off and unwilling to come into contact with the outside world. You immersed yourself in work and numbed yourself. Actually, you can find someone more suitable for you." Gu Xingze frowned but didn't say anything in the end. Qin Zhou sighed. Not long after his debut, he started to manage Gu Xingze. Gu Xingze had been in the industry for 10 years. He had been in the industry for 11 years. In these 10 years, he couldn't tell if it was him who made Gu Xingze or Gu Xingze who made him. After taking care of him for 10 years, Qin Zhou's heart ached for Xingze. When he first met Xingze, it was during a high-level meeting. Xingze entered the entertainment industry because he was once spotted by a talent scout on the streets of America. He was invited to the company and was coaxed into signing a contract. Strictly speaking, Qin Zhou was his second manager. At that time, Qin Zhou was just 20 years old. He was promoted from an assistant to a manager and was considered a greenhorn. When he first met Gu Xingze, his first impression was that the young man had an arrogant temperament. He sat at the table with a few executives surrounding him. They were all smiling and looking at him as if he was a money tree. However, he didn't say a word. His expression was cold and there was no emotion in his eyes. At that time, the domestic entertainment industry wasn't at its peak. At that time, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japanese, and Korean idols were very popular. Gu Xingze was like a piece of high-quality jade. Even though he hadn't been carved, he was still natural. He was the kind of person who would be attracted by his handsome appearance at a glance. He had unlimited potential. However, it wasn't until he got to know him better that he understood that this youth's coldness seeped into his bones. He was the illegitimate son of the Gu family in the capital. He had the blood of the Gu family, but he was not acknowledged by the Gu family. When he was very young, he was exiled abroad and lived alone. The reason why Gu Xingze was exiled was because he was overseas and had nothing except for his expensive living expenses. There was no affection, no family, no friends. His mother had left him a long time ago. Therefore, it could be said that Gu Xingze had always been alone. Therefore, the first time they met, Qin Zhou saw a strong sense of loneliness and melancholy in his eyes, as well as a distant aura that was difficult to get close to. He was usually a man of few words. It was only when he was on stage that he forced a smile as if he was wearing a mask. She was blessed with exceptional beauty and was sought after by her fans. Her first album was a whirlwind and she became famous overnight. Ever since his debut, Gu Xingze had been a rare, high-quality idol in the entertainment industry. He was immune to any rumors. The entertainment industry was a big dive at. No matter who stepped into it, they would be tainted. The relationships between men and women in the circle were very messy. There are always these chaotic parties. Chapter 1506. The company home 2 points, 1 line. Other than that, he had to rush for work and fly all over the world. Yun Shirshir was probably the only woman he cared about. Was it because Shirshir gave him the feeling of home? Qin Zhou immediately understood. Yun Shirshir did have a warm charm. She did not speak much, but when she smiled, she seemed to be able to give people endless strength. When he was with her, he felt very at ease, very steady, and very calm. Indeed, there was the warmth of a family. But this woman was the only one he could not touch no matter what. Xingze, you should be rational, Qin Zhou said earnestly. I also like Shirshir a lot, but you have to remember that this is not a woman you should touch. Remember, this is not a woman you should touch. Gu Xingze closed his eyes deeply. Qin Zhou said to him as if he was bewitching him, cut off these feelings that you should not have. Xingze, listen to my advice. Mu Yaja is not someone you can afford to offend. Even if, Gu Xingze suddenly raised his voice and interrupted him. His handsome eyes suddenly opened, revealing a sense of ambition and desire that he had never had before. Even if I become the head of the Gu family? Qin Zhou was stunned, not understanding the meaning behind his words. Is it because of Mu Yaja's status as Firen? Or is it because the Mu family is so powerful that I, as an artist, cannot compete with them? Gu Xingze's tone suddenly became a little agitated. He suddenly leaned forward and grabbed Qin Zhou's collar tightly. Then, if I replace my brother and become the head of the Gu family, will this status be enough to compete with him? Qin Zhou quickly covered his mouth. Don't say such dangerous things. He paused and suddenly lowered his voice. Don't forget that the Gu family has assigned people to watch over you 24/7. What if the room is bugged and Gu Jinglian hears what you said? His voice stopped abruptly, but he didn't continue speaking. Gu Xingze's mouth was covered, but his face was calm and there was no fear in his eyes. He just stared at him coldly. Qin Zhou's heart skipped a beat. Gu Xingze's bold words still echoed in his ears. If I become the head of the Gu family, will this identity be enough to go against him? Was he crazy? In order to snatch a woman from Mu Yaja, he didn't hesitate to compete with Gu Jinglian for the position of the head of the family. Was he crazy? Qin Zhou suddenly asked, how much do you love her? How much do you love that woman? Don't you care? She and Mu Yaja have 2 children. Gu Xingze remained silent. Qin Zhou continued, 7 years ago, the Mu family hired a girl with a clean background to be a surrogate mother for the Mu family and gave birth to 2 children. And I've already found out that this girl is Yun Shirshir. You really don't mind? Why should I mind? Gu Xingze retorted coldly. Qin Zhou was stunned. I like her. I don't care about the past. Qin Zhou said, yes, you don't care. You're with her. But what about the two children? Gu Xingze was silent for a while. Suddenly, he said very seriously, I will be a qualified father for them. Qin Zhou couldn't believe it. Are you crazy? Yes, I'm crazy. Chapter 1507. You're crazy. Qin Zhou widened his eyes in disbelief. Is she worth it? Is she worth it? Gu Xingze stared at him with determination. She's worth it. Qin Zhou was stunned and choked on his words. Gu Xingze clenched his fists. Under the moonlight, his handsome face looked determined. I want to give her the happiest life. He wanted to give Shirshir the happiest life. Even if you have to sacrifice your life for her? Qin Zhou frowned with a complicated expression. Yes, it was a simple word, but there was no hesitation. Gu Xingze's eyes were unprecedentedly determined. In the past, he rarely took the initiative. Initially, he had hidden his feelings for Yun Shirshir deep in his heart because he did not want his feelings to burden her. If you love someone, you should not be conservative, but you should not bring trouble to that person. But now he did not think so, especially when he saw the scene on television where Mu Yaja held Yun Shirshir in his arms as they walked down the red carpet. He could not take it lying down. He was not willing to give in. He was not willing to give up the woman he loved to someone else. Gu Xingze walked to the rubbish bin and bent down slightly. He picked up the bouquet of lilies in the bin and held it in his hands. These were the flowers he had intended to give her. Qin Zhou stared at his proud back view. His expression was complicated, but there was also a trace of helplessness. He knew Xingze well. Once he was stubborn, he was hopeless. He could not help but worry for him. Xingze, have you thought it through? Gu Xingze's back was facing him. He said in a low voice, yes, I want to get Shirshir back. Qin Zhou said, have you ever thought that she doesn't love you? What will you do? Gu Xingze heard this and turned around. His lips curled into an enchanting smile. No, I will make her fall in love with me. After the banquet ended, Yun Shirshir searched the venue but did not find Qin Zhou and Gu Xingze. She could not help but feel puzzled. At the same time, she felt a little empty in her heart. Why wasn't Gu Xingze at the banquet? She did not see him today. Could it be that he did not attend? Did something happen? She was actually a little worried. Originally, Gu Xingze had invited her to walk the red carpet with him, and she had agreed. But now that she had broken her promise, she could not help but feel a little guilty. When she dialed Qin Zhou's number, she couldn't get through either. Mu Yaja hugged her and asked, who are you looking for? Yun Shirshir turned around, and the panic in her eyes disappeared. She immediately replied, I'm looking for Qin Zhou. Why are you looking for him? I'm checking on you. Yun Shirshir glanced at him. Why did it sound like an interrogation? Why? Can't I ask? Mu Yaja pretended to be unhappy and said, it's so late. He should be back at the hotel. Then he should have told me. I've already greeted him. What? Mu Yaja leaned close to her ear and said ambiguously, I told him that you are mine tonight. Hey! Yun Shirshir gritted her teeth. She was a little angry at him for spouting nonsense. She could not help but glare at him. Why did you say that? It will cause a misunderstanding. Mu Yaja suddenly lowered his head and gave her a fierce peck on the lips. There was a hint of displeasure in it. Misunderstanding what? Yun Shirshir was at a loss for words. The chauffeur arrived in the car. He hugged her and used one arm to stabilize her weight. He carried her into the car. As soon as they got into the car, he impatiently covered her lips again. Chapter 1508. Mu Yaja raised the partition, separating the driver's seat from the back seat. At the same time, he trapped her in his arms and kissed her passionately. In front of him, she was no match for him at all. She met his aggressive kiss with difficulty, but for a moment, she was so frightened by his ferocious strength that she did not know what to do. In just a short while, she was dizzy from his kiss and turned into a puddle of spring water in his arms. She was completely powerless to resist and was no match for his attack. As her consciousness drifted away, he hugged her and sat her in his arms. His long legs supported all of her weight as he hugged her back and continued this deep kiss. Yoon Shirshir was so pitiful that she was in a daze from his kiss. She closed her eyes and felt that the man in front of her would have turned into a flood and mercilessly devoured her in the next second if they were not still in the car. This kiss was not enough for him to taste her beauty. He went so far as to put his hand under her skirt. Yoon Shirshir was at a loss for words. Ah! Her face was as hot as blood. Don't! She lowered her voice and begged pitifully. Hearing her begging, Mu Yaja opened his handsome eyes and stopped her. What? Hey! We're still in the car. The more Yoon Shirshir spoke, the redder her face became. You, don't be like this. Don't what? Mu Yaja mischievously tempted her to continue speaking. Yoon Shirshir's face was so red that she could not speak. She wanted to say that they were still in the car. Could he be a little more cautious and not be like a hungry wolf? Mu Yaja lifted her chin and his gaze fell on her beautiful face with simple makeup. His fingertips gently rubbed those alluring lips. Originally, her lips were smeared with a layer of bright red lipstick. However, after a passionate kiss, the color of her lips had already faded and returned to their original pink color. However, it was such a natural cherry blossom pink color that it was extremely easy to arouse his desire to ruthlessly ravage her. Kiss me. His words were not to be defied. Yoon Shirshir bit her lips hard, but she was too ashamed to obey his orders. Mu Yaja saw her hesitation, and his eyes burned with passion again. When Yoon Shirshir saw this, she was afraid that he would go berserk, so she ignored everything else and held his handsome face with her small hands, clumsily pressing her lips against his. She carefully licked and kissed him, the tip of her tongue delicately tracing the shape of his lips. Her inexperienced kissing skills made him unable to be satisfied. Kissing like this, there was no way to enjoy himself to the fullest. What a stupid woman. She didn't know how to kiss at all. He bit her lips unhappily, causing her to cry out in surprise. However, in the end, he still managed to hold himself back. Mu Yaja fiercely restrained himself and allowed her to kiss him clumsily. Her small hands held his face and kissed him sincerely and seriously. He couldn't bear to interrupt her. Humph, stupid woman. As he hugged her, he felt that every minute and every second that passed was an indescribable torture, especially when her exquisite figure was intimately snuggled up to him. It was torture in disguise. Mu Yaja gritted his teeth as fine sweat seeped out of his temples. The car arrived at the entrance of the hotel. Chapter 1509. Mu Yaja hugged her waist and said, "Get off the car!" At this moment, Yoon Shirshir's body was slightly limp. That lingering kiss earlier had almost suffocated her. Hence, when he hugged her waist, he quickly noticed that something was wrong with her body. Looking at her weak and boneless figure as she fell into his arms, Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows slightly, and there was a teasing and playful look in his eyes. Why, can't walk anymore? No matter how one looked at it, the curve of his lips was playful and full of evil. Yoon Shirshir couldn't help but feel annoyed, and at the same time, she hated this man's evil smile as she stared at him in annoyance, feeling extremely embarrassed. She tugged at his sleeve and stammered, My legs are a little numb." Mu Yaja curled his lips slightly, but there was an ambiguous flame in his eyes which landed on her face. So much so that Yoon Shirshir felt even more embarrassed from his deep gaze. This man. Really? This man was too evil. She was so embarrassed, and wasn't the main culprit behind all of this because of him? Mu Yaja casually admired her embarrassment and didn't pull her or hug her. He just watched as she slowly got off the car, and with his long arms, he pulled her into his embrace. He couldn't help but kiss her earlobe as his heart was getting more and more anxious for her. However, he still forcefully endured it, and in his voice, there was a trace of unusual oppression and obscurity. "Little thing, is this all you've got, N? You?" Yoon Shirshir was even more embarrassed and angry as she raised her hand and hammered his chest. Mu Yaja didn't even bother to dodge as he allowed her to punch him. To him, this little fellow's fist strength was really insignificant, and it was just like scratching an itch. He stretched out his long arm and firmly supported her. His right arm exerted a little force, and her entire body was wrapped in his embrace. Compared to his 188 body, she was just too petite. Adding on to the fact that she was skinny, with one hand holding her, it was as if he was holding a large cloth doll. She didn't see any strained expression on his face as he hugged her like this without any effort at all. Being hugged by him like this, she felt like a little child. Yoon Shirshir's face was full of charm, and when she raised her head to look at him, she could only see the side of his handsome face, which was incomparably handsome, and at the same time, it revealed a bone-deep arrogance. This man's strength had already reached a terrifying stage. Although she was skinny, she was still 48 kilograms, and he was able to steadily support her with one arm, which was really shocking. When Mu Yaja carried her into the hotel in such a strange way, the few waiters in the lobby were all stunned as they looked on helplessly. While they were shocked, they couldn't help but sigh at this man's astonishing arm strength. Some female staff were shocked, and at the same time, they also felt envious. Yoon Shirshir probably didn't know. However, when the others saw Mu Yaja lowered his head to look at her, that pair of doting eyes, just one look and they felt that their hearts were about to melt. They stared at this scene without blinking. The man was incomparably handsome and well-dressed, while the woman was petite and delicate. Her delicate features revealed the charm of an Eastern classic. Chapter 15:10. No matter how one looked at it, the two of them looked so compatible, especially when Mu Yaja hugged the woman in his arms like she was a rag doll. Many people were envious and jealous. What was the happiest thing in a relationship? It was probably when a man doted on a woman like a princess and held her in the palm of his hand like a child. Hey? Yoon Shirshir received the strange looks that were cast at her. She couldn't help but gently tug at Mu Yaja's lapel and said in embarrassment, "Put me down. I can walk on my own now." She kept feeling that she was being hugged by him like a child. The staff in the hotel looked at her with surprise and envy, which made her feel very uncomfortable. She only felt that it was weird. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows, but he didn't understand the awkwardness in her heart. "I'm not putting you down." Ha! He liked hugging her like this. He liked the feeling of her quietly nestling in his arms or fooling around. The elevator door opened, and he carried her into the elevator. He pressed the button for the floor. In the narrow space, there were only the two of them. Yoon Shirshir lowered her head and nestled in his chest. However, she could feel Mu Yaja's scorching gaze still on her body. It was incomparably hot. She only felt that her exposed skin was about to be burned deeply by this scorching gaze. The floor jumped over the 8th floor and headed towards the 15th floor. The suite he booked was on the 15th floor. When the elevator door opened, Mu Yaja carried her and walked towards the room. He took out his key card and swiped it to enter the room. Mu Yaja put her down and casually locked the door. Yoon Shirshir was wearing 8-centimeter high heels. When she landed, she was caught off guard. She lost her balance and almost fell. However, the man quickly grabbed her arm and helped her up easily. "Why are you so clumsy?" He didn't hide the teasing and ridicule in his words. When the sound of the door being locked was heard, Yoon Shirshir didn't even have time to react. She felt the man's warm palm push her. Then that solid and tall body covered her. While she was still in a daze, her body was pressed against the door by him. When she felt the incredible heat coming from his body, she instantly turned pale. "Mu Yaja!" She pushed him in embarrassment. How did this man turn from a well-dressed business tycoon into a wild beast the moment he entered the room? Along the way, she felt the scorching gaze in his eyes. Her heart was uneasy, but this man was too. They had just entered the door and were still at the entrance, but he seemed to be a little impatient. Mu Yaja pressed her down and lowered his head. No matter how elegant a man was, he wouldn't pretend to be a gentleman at this moment. He admitted that he couldn't wait to have her. Thus, he lowered his head and kissed her on the lips. His aggressive stance was completely on par with the ferocious strength from before. He didn't give her any room to resist at all, and he took her shock and anger into his mouth. In this aspect, Men had always held the absolute initiative. No man liked to dilly-dally and oppress himself when it came to matters of the heart. He casually took off his suit jacket. He was like a teenager who had tasted forbidden fruit for the first time. He wanted to taste her. Chapter 15:11. Other than her, he had never touched any other woman. However, out of so many women, he could not resist her. He could not get enough of kissing and tasting. On the way back to the hotel, and even on the way back while carrying her, he pretended to be calm and looked at her. However, in his mind, he had already thought of several angles and positions. He had even planned out what position he should change to tonight so that he could have her without restraint. In this world, it seemed that she was the only one who could fit him perfectly. Just thinking about it made it hard for him to control himself. However, she had a conservative personality, so he endured until the moment they entered the room. He could not control himself for one more second. Pressing down on her, he crazily pulled her into his embrace. He wished he could rub this tormenting little thing into his bones and blood. He wished the two of them could become one. Only then would he be able to extinguish the raging flames in his heart. Even though he did not leave her for a moment, he still missed the pleasure of devouring her body. However, this little thing's stamina was too weak. After kissing her a few times in the car, she was already in a daze. How could this be? To him, that little bit of kissing was just an appetizer. He was greedy and could not satisfy his hunger at all. However, this was all she could do. Yun Shirshir could only feel the world spinning around her. His kiss was ferocious. With his arms around her waist, he spun her around and brought her to the sofa in the living room. In the dark, he pressed her down on the sofa and tasted her sweet breath without restraint. So beautiful, so sweet. He could not taste enough of her sweetness. Yun Shirshir was a little afraid of him. The man in front of her was very different from the elegant gentleman at the banquet earlier. At the banquet he was arrogant, elegant, and courteous. However, at this moment, the man in front of her was more like a ferocious beast that had accurately targeted its prey. His gaze was burning, as if she would be eaten alive in the next second. Hey! Stop for a moment. Yun Shirshir pushed his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. What's wrong? Let's take a shower first, okay? She spoke softly, as if she was begging him to be merciful. She wasn't ready yet. If he had been a little gentler, she wouldn't have been so frightened. But who was Wuxia? How could he be so easily dismissed? How could he not tell that she was just brushing him off? It seemed that this little woman still hadn't adapted to her style. However, if this kind of thing was suppressed, it would inevitably not be enough fun. Especially at this moment under the moonlight, the way she looked limp in his arms. Her cheeks were tender and rosy, like a delicate flower bud, bashful and waiting to bloom. It was as if he had fallen into a hopeless demon. How could he control himself? After this, I'll go wash up. After he finished speaking, he greedily kissed those lips that were as sweet as a peach, and he felt the flames in his body ignite. He stopped suppressing himself and possessed her. Yun Shirshir let out a muffled groan. She was frightened by his overbearing force. Her face was incomparably red as she bit her lips. However, she still could not help but let out a low, pleading sound. This man was too vile. Chapter 15:12. After a brief lull in the battle that lasted for an hour, the man buried his head in her neck and breathed freely. He felt incomparably refreshed after venting all of his desires. Yun Shirshir closed her eyes as her chest heaved up and down. She was so weak that she couldn't even lift her eyelids. The man's powerful and sexy panting kept ringing in her ears. Her small hands were on his shoulders, and her fingertips were slightly clenched. Wuxia raised his head to look at the woman in his arms. She was sweating profusely and her clothes were sticky. After a battle, she was exhausted. Her expensive dress was torn into pieces by the man and thrown to the side mercilessly. Yun Shirshir nestled in his arms tiredly, but she couldn't muster any strength. Go take a shower, Wuxia said in a deep voice. However, he only said half of what he wanted to say. The second half was, continue after you're done. Yun Shirshir nodded in confusion. She looked at the man in front of her who had restrained his fierce aura and felt relieved. She was elated at the thought of being able to lie on a warm bed and rest after a comfortable bath. However, at this moment she was like Little Red Riding Hood in a fairy tale. She didn't know that a big hungry wolf was silently hiding his tail behind his back and not showing it to her. After all, how could a man who had been suppressed for so long be so easy to get rid of? Wuxia carried Yun Shishir into the bathroom. The room he booked was a presidential suite. Just the bathroom alone was more than 20 square meters. The bathtub was big enough for 2 people to lie down in, and it was big enough for the 2 of them to have sex with each other. He turned on the shower and held her in his arms as he carefully massaged her thighs. Yun Shishir blushed beyond reason. This man, how did he know that her thighs were so sore at this moment? However, she couldn't help but admire Wuxia's attentiveness. Usually, after sex, he would pay attention to her movements when she got out of bed. He always felt that her thighs were a little uncomfortable and her walking posture was a little unnatural. He seriously looked up some information in this regard. Yun Shishir could not help feeling satisfied. She nestled in his arms and allowed him to knead and pinch her as she fell into a sweet sleep. Just as the bathtub was filled with water, the doorbell suddenly rang. Wuxia raised his eyebrows suspiciously. He didn't want to pay attention to it, but the person outside the door saw that no one was paying attention and rang the doorbell even more impatiently. Yun Shishir was awakened by the doorbell. She looked up and opened her eyes in confusion. Who's ringing the doorbell? I'll go take a look. Wuxia knitted his brows in displeasure. He got up, put on a bathrobe, tied it up, and walked out of the door. He walked to the entrance, and as soon as he opened the door, he was stunned. He saw Linji standing outside the door. When she saw him open the door, she couldn't help but blush. There was a hint of wanting to say something. Wuxia frowned slightly and sized her up. He saw that she was wearing silk pajamas that were almost transparent. She stood shyly outside the door with her head lowered and her hands clutching the hem of her skirt. She looked a little shy and timid. His gaze suddenly noticed something strange. He glanced at her chest and saw that her full chest didn't seem to be covered by the pajamas. Through the material of the pajamas, he could see everything inside. Chapter 15:13. Linji had returned to the hotel early after the banquet. She was ambitious and had been preparing for tonight's event for a long time. When she saw Wuxia at Louis Vuitton's studio, she was stunned. Wuxia was the biggest boss behind Huanyu. He held the largest share of Huanyu's shares and was the boss of Huanyu. He could also be said to be the emperor who controlled the entertainment industry. However, as the successor of Wuxia, he was used to keeping a low profile and rarely exposed himself to the limelight. Everyone thought that he would be an ordinary man. However, when Linji saw this mysterious business tycoon with her own eyes, she was shocked. Oh my God, what a handsome and cool man. He completely shattered her original impression of this man. He was tall and slender with an imposing aura. His handsome features were exquisite, and his perfect and elegant temperament crushed all the little fresh meats in the entertainment industry. He was so handsome. If he was in the entertainment industry, he would definitely gain countless fans. However, this man was a business tycoon and elite of the empire. He held the vast Mu Empire in his hands and was incomparably honorable. A man like this, no matter what kind of woman, would flock to him like a flock of ducks. Was Wuxia Yun Shishir's sugar daddy? Linji could not help but be suspicious. After connecting the dots, she was certain of this idea. Wuxia must be Yun Shishir's backer. Otherwise, how could Yun Shishir get so many resources when she just debuted? Even if her manager was Qin Zhou, these resources were too generous. So many people could only dream of it. First, she felt indignant. How could Yun Shishir get to hook up with such a handsome, rich, and powerful sugar daddy like Wuxia? When she thought about it again, the first person she slept with when she debuted was an elderly investor. When she thought about it, she instantly felt that it was quite unfair. Therefore, Linji made up her mind to snatch Wuxia, this big shot, from Yun Shishir's hands. She hurried back to the hotel from the banquet. The hotel she was staying at was different from the one Wuxia was staying at. Lin Ji racked her brains and finally found out the hotel Muyaja was staying at. She packed her luggage and hurried over. Muyaja had already booked a luxurious suite downstairs from the presidential suite. She specially redid her makeup and deliberately imitated Yoon Shirshir's makeup. It was clear and beautiful, light and delicate. Muyaja took a fancy to Yoon Shirshir because he liked Yoon Shirshir's aesthetic style, pure, immature, and even like a young student. These days, the big bosses in the circle all liked this kind of taste. Thus, Lin Ji imitated Yoon Shirshir's dressing and took off all her clothes except for a silk nightgown. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself in the mirror. The silk nightgown was extremely light and thin. Under the light, one could easily see the outline of her body wrapped in the nightgown through the fabric. It was a little ambiguous. Lin Ji was very pleased with herself. She purposely dressed so sexy and flirtatious. She didn't believe that Muyaja wouldn't take the bait when she sent herself to his door like this. Lin Ji's ambition was huge. She fantasized about seducing Muyaja. After she took this man for herself, Yoon Shirshir would be mercilessly kicked away. Chapter 15:14. At that time, all she had to do was think about how to get close to him, coax him, and make this sugar daddy happy. When the time came, she would be able to marry into a rich family in glory. That was the direction she should be working towards. There were so many female celebrities in the entertainment industry. How many of them entered the industry purely because of their passion for acting? Most of them used acting as a springboard to fame. Once they gained some fame, they would have the opportunity to enter the upper class and interact with the aristocrats. Marrying into a rich family was their ultimate goal. Lin Ji was no exception. Her family was not well off since she was young. Perhaps she was afraid of being poor, so she had a strong desire for material things and power. To her, in marriage, love was dispensable. Material things were the only thing that mattered. Therefore, marrying into a rich family was her greatest wish. When Lin Ji arrived, she was fantasizing that if her plan was successful and she could gain Muyaja's favor, it would be best if she could kick Yoon Shirshir out of the picture. Then, she would be able to flaunt in front of Yoon Shirshir. According to the rumors, only one of the gowns Yoon Shirshir wore at the Fashion Week was provided by Louis Vuitton. No one knew where the rest came from. Could it be that she had bought them herself? They must have been given to her by Muyaja. Whether it was the ink-style gown or the Cheongsam gown that stole the limelight at the banquet, Muyaja had probably bought them at a high price for her to wear. What a generous gift. Muyaja was really generous when it came to her. Lin Ji's heart was filled with envy. In her heart, she yearned for Muyaja even more. If one day she could rise to the top, that would be amazing. The moment the door opened, Lin Ji saw Muyaja standing in the doorway. He was wearing a black bathrobe. It seemed that he had just come out of the bathroom. His entire body was dripping wet, and his hair was slightly messy and slanted. It covered his brows and left a deep shadow on his eyelids. Fine droplets of water dripped from the ends of his hair. It was obvious that he had just come out of the bathtub. Lin Ji's heart skipped a beat, and her face turned red. This was not an act. She was really mesmerized by Muyaja's handsome face. For a moment, she had completely forgotten the lines that she had prepared over and over again. She had forgotten how to open her mouth at that moment. She looked down and saw the man's slightly open chest. His chest was exposed to the air. His muscles were well-defined, and there were water droplets on them. His sexy muscles stretched all the way down. Damn it! He was so charming. Lin Ji lost control of herself for a moment. Her eyes were fixed on him, and she couldn't look away. Oh my God! Looking at this man up close, he was even more handsome than when she had first seen him from a few meters away. For the first time in her life, she was almost suffocated by a man's beauty. A man like this was definitely a godlike existence. Lin Ji was so mesmerized that she forgot how to be jealous of Yoon Shirshir. She only wanted to take Muyaja down. She must have this man in her pocket. Even if she had to spend the rest of her life, she must tame him. Chapter 15:15. He blocked the door with his tall body, as if he had no intention of letting her pass. He knew very well what this woman's intentions were and what her goal was. As the big boss of Huanyu, he had met many women who overestimated themselves. They thought that they were beautiful and sent themselves to his door. In the past, he had to fly to other cities for business. Some investors saw the opportunity and even used unscrupulous means to send beauties to his bed. They were all carefully selected and were 1 in a million beauties. However, he was cold and indifferent. At that time, he was in the prime of his life, but he actually rejected these beauties who sent themselves to his door. There was once an investor who was so angry that he had internal bleeding. In order to cooperate with him, they specially selected an 18-year-old model from the young model circle. They stripped her naked and sent her to his bed, but he actually chased her out of the door. That young model was naked and sobbing outside the door. No matter how much she knocked on the door, he didn't move at all. How amazing! Lin Ji obviously hadn't heard of these rumors. She thought that with Mu Yaja's young and vigorous age, she could successfully climb onto the dragon bed if she dressed up a little more charmingly and sexily. But was that possible? Mu Yaja was a normal man. He also had vigor and desire. However, this kind of desire could only be shown in front of one person. As for the rest, he simply ignored them to the end. Thus, when Lin Ji was full of anticipation, she saw his handsome brows slightly raised and he said coldly, "What's the matter?" His handsome and cold face didn't have the slightest ripple. It was cold and indifferent, as if covered in ice and snow. Lin Ji was stunned. It was a completely different way of opening from what she had imagined. In her imagination, when she appeared dressed like this, shouldn't this man see through her motive at a glance and then pull her into the room? Was there something wrong with her? Lin Ji couldn't help but carefully reevaluate herself. There was nothing wrong with her. She even purposely pinched Yun Shirshir's demeanor. Yun Shirshir was just like her name. Her name was poetic and picturesque. She was also beautiful. If she had to be described, she was like the clouds in the mountain stream and the running water in the small spring. She had a unique style of the Jiangnan water village. Thus, Lin Ji deliberately followed Yun Shirshir's template and put on the same makeup as Yun Shirshir. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she actually looked similar to Yun Shirshir. Mu Yaja must have taken a liking to Yun Shirshir because he liked her temperament. Delicate and pretty, pure and beautiful. It was like a piece of flawless jade. Since that was the case, she would follow Yun Shirshir's example and imitate her. However, from Mu Yaja's indifferent eyes, her meticulous plan seemed to have some flaws. Not being able to attract this man at first glance made her feel a little frustrated. However, Lin Ji wasn't discouraged. When it came to sending herself to the door, Lin Ji knew that she had to be thick-skinned. She couldn't care less about face and dignity. Even if she had to beg him on her knees, she had to beg him to take her. Thus, Lin Ji raised the hand that was originally behind her back. In the palm of her hand was a bowl. Chapter 15:16. Lin Ji held the bowl. Her eyes curved into crescents as she asked timidly, "Mr. Mu, may I sit in your room for a while?" The moment she said that, coupled with the bowl, her intention was clear. Whether it was in the open or in the dark, it was a hint to Mu Yaja. A bowl? Homophony. One night. This was a clear indication that she wanted to sleep with him for a night. Sometimes, the unspoken rules hidden in the unspoken language were just that wonderful. The entertainment industry loved literature and art. So much so that even the act of sleeping with someone could be done in such a stylish manner and be bestowed with such elegant sentiments. Mu Yaja frowned slightly. Before he could say anything, Lin Ji was afraid that he would reject her, so she immediately expressed her attitude. "Mr. Mu, don't worry. I'm very obedient. Very obedient. I'm a very obedient woman. I won't do anything that makes you unhappy, and I won't play any tricks. I'll definitely follow your orders like an imperial edict. But please don't reject me, okay?" After a pause, Lin Ji moved greedily and cautiously a few steps closer to the door. Tonight, she had to enter this room. Even if she couldn't climb into his bed, it didn't matter. Entering this room would at least mean that she had succeeded. Not far from here, she had specially ordered someone to secretly take a video. Once she entered this room, they would make a screenshot. When the time came, even if she didn't succeed in hooking up with a big shot like Wuxia, she could still use these videos to create hype. Lin Ji had put a lot of thought into this and was very scheming. Wuxia asked coldly, "Who asked you to come?" Lin Ji was stunned. "There's no one? I wanted to accompany you of my own accord." "No need," Wuxia said decisively and was about to close the door. However, how could Lin Ji give up just like that? Seeing that Wuxia was about to close the door and shut her out, she made up her mind. She clenched her teeth and unexpectedly stretched out her leg, trying to use her own flesh and blood to block the door from closing. Wuxia didn't notice at all, and he didn't expect her to do that. The door closed and her leg was pinched. Ah! With a stifled cry, Lin Ji's legs went limp and she half knelt by the door. Wuxia turned around and realized what had happened. This woman actually used her leg to block the door from closing. So vicious and merciless? Most people were ruthless only because of their attitude towards others. This woman was so cruel to herself. While Wuxia was in a daze, Lin Ji took advantage of the moment he was distracted and limped in through the crack in the door. Even if he had to crawl into this room. Lin Ji crawled into the room and closed the door behind her. Wuxia was completely stunned by her unscrupulous methods. After a long while, he finally returned to his senses and let out a cold laugh. "Woman, you have some tricks up your sleeve." In order to enter his room, she had even resorted to the ruse of injuring herself to gain his confidence, using his own flesh and blood as the price. However, he had already seen many such shameless women and had long been used to it. Would these tricks work? He didn't like her at all. "Get out." Wuxia didn't give her any leeway and said coldly, "No." Chapter 15:17. "Just let me stay here tonight, okay? Let me serve you well. Don't worry. I'll definitely serve you well and satisfy you." As she spoke, Lin Ji actually took the initiative to kneel in front of him and reach out, wanting to touch him. Wuxia glanced at her from the corner of his eye and nimbly retreated, intending to avoid her at all costs. Lin Ji was instantly annoyed. How could she forget that Wuxia should like reserved and shy girls like Yun Shishir? She actually forgot for a moment and revealed her true nature, impatiently wanting to pounce on him. He didn't like her like this. Thus, Lin Ji smiled and asked, "What do you like? Can I learn?" Wuxia was expressionless. Lin Ji continued, "If you like someone like Yun Shishir, I can also become like her. What's your motive? You can just say it. Don't beat around the bush." Wuxia impatiently interrupted her. Lin Ji's eyes widened, but she heard his cold and clear voice like snow. "What's your motive? Just say it and get lost after you're done." He could very well pick her up and kick her out of the door. But for some reason, seeing her face made him feel disgusted, and he didn't even want to touch her with a finger. He could clearly see that Lin Ji's timid and shy demeanor, like Lin Dayu's, was deliberately imitating someone else. However, some people's temperaments were very unique. When it came to themselves, it was natural and people couldn't help but want to protect and dote on them. However, if this temperament were to be imitated by others, it would only seem suspicious and pretentious, and especially disgusting. Yun Shishir had a spiritual aura about her. But this spiritual aura couldn't be imitated. The hardest thing to imitate in a person was temperament. Lin Ji couldn't help but feel extremely embarrassed. She had never fallen into such a predicament before. In the past, when she delivered herself to the door, those rich men who saw her were clearly like hungry wolves who saw their prey. They couldn't wait to ferociously pin her down on the bed and devour her until she was skinned alive. But when it came to him, why did he get snubbed? Not to mention that she had been given the cold shoulder. She had shamelessly entered the room, but he had chased her away. She was really unwilling to accept this. Lin Ji felt extremely wronged. She blinked her eyes, and bean-sized tears rolled down her cheeks, dripping onto the expensive carpet under her feet. Why can't I?" Lin Ji suddenly raised her voice and stared at him with tears in her eyes. She looked extremely pitiful. "How am I inferior to her?" Lin Ji raised her voice. "I can serve you well. At the same time, I will be very obedient. If you say 1, I won't say 2. Before he could finish, Yun Shirshir's shocked voice suddenly came from the bathroom. Muyaja? Muyaja suddenly turned his head, only to hear Yun Shirshir's suspicious voice. Who's in the living room? Yun Shirshir was originally lying in the bathtub, leisurely taking a bath. She was exhausted from being tormented by him. Looking at her body, she was bitten by a vile man with bruises intertwined, as if she had been bitten by poisonous insects. The shower in the bathroom was still running, so at first, she couldn't hear the movement outside the door at all, until Lin Ji's grievances and cries alarmed her. Only then did she realize that there was someone else outside the door. Chapter 15:18. However, her brain was slow to react and she couldn't remember who it was. However, she could tell that it was a woman. Yun Shirshir was shocked and curious about what was going on outside the door. She could hear a hint of conflict in the woman's voice. Hence, she stood up and casually wiped her body. Then, she put on a bathrobe and walked out of the room. Muyaja! Yun Shirshir called out softly again, but it sounded very natural. Lin Ji finally heard that the voice wasn't a hallucination. There was a woman in this room. This woman is so capable. She could call Muyaja by his full name. He was a big shot with high authority and was from a prestigious family. She didn't even dare to look him in the eye. Yet, this woman could call him by his full name. She didn't have the time to figure out who this woman was. She could only curse silently. No wonder this man didn't want her to come in. It was no wonder that when she opened the door, she saw that he was wet. Her arrival had probably disturbed his good time. Alas, by the time she realized who the voice had come from, Yun Shirshir's figure appeared in her line of sight. Yun Shirshir walked into the living room and looked over. She saw Lin Ji half kneeling in front of Muyaja in an extremely awkward and embarrassed posture. In an instant, Yun Shirshir's expression changed. She frowned and looked at Muyaja in confusion. Then, her gaze landed on Lin Ji's face. Her eyes were full of contempt. Why are you here? Why are you here? Almost at the same time, they spoke in unison. Lin Ji was shocked. In the next moment, her gaze locked onto Lin Ji. Yun Shirshir was wearing a bathrobe. Because the belt of the bathrobe was tied very tightly, it wrapped around her entire body tightly. However, it was a bathrobe after all. The view on her neck couldn't be hidden no matter what. Therefore, Lin Ji could see the jade-like collarbones and fair skin on her neck at a glance. What was even more eye-catching were the incomparably ambiguous kiss marks. It was easy to imagine what had happened to her body just now. She was no longer the innocent girl who had just left school. He immediately understood what had happened in the living room just now. Because even now, she could still smell the lingering charm in the living room. It was so ambiguous that it made her blush. This was a mark that would only be left after an intense love affair. Yun Shirshir followed her line of sight and looked at her own body. She caught a glimpse of the incomparably eye-catching mark and immediately pulled it into her clothes to cover it up. Lin Ji finally understood that she had come at a bad time. What happened? Yun Shirshir looked at Muyaja suspiciously, as if waiting for an explanation. Why was Lin Ji here? Most importantly, she was wearing such revealing clothes. Although her clothes were neatly worn, the texture was really thin. Under the illumination of the light, her body could be seen at a glance. Yun Shirshir came to a sudden realization as well. She finally understood what the other's motive was. She was planning to seduce someone with her beauty. Muyaja glanced at her coldly from the corner of his eyes. Get lost. Chapter 15:19. Left with no other choice, Lin Ji could only tidy herself up, wipe her tears, and return home dejectedly. Only then did this farce come to an end. Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows in apparent displeasure. How could a woman send herself to his doorstep, kneeling and begging for his favor? Why did these women treat him like a tyrant from ancient times? Most importantly, this woman was Lin Ji, an incomparably disgusting woman. Yun Shirshir felt as disgusted as if she had swallowed a fly. It was as if a fishbone was stuck in her throat, and she instantly felt uncomfortable all over. Even though Mu Yaja didn't do anything substantial, Lin Ji's behavior had unintentionally made her uncomfortable. She was thoroughly disgusted by what she had seen. Yun Shirshir clutched her chest. She was clearly infuriated. She wasn't angry at Mu Yaja, but she was deeply disgusted by Lin Ji's shamelessness. This was the first time she had seen it. Then what about when she wasn't around? Did such things keep happening? Once she thought of the danger lurking around him, and the fact that so many women saw him as a god, chasing after him, and falling in love with him. Her possessiveness was incomparably shameful. She felt dirty. There was an expensive carpet at the entrance. When Lin Ji knelt, she instantly felt that it was an eyesore. Thinking of how Lin Ji looked just now, kneeling there in disgust, she couldn't stand it anymore. She walked over and threw the carpet out of the door in disgust like a child. Mu Yaja looked at her childish behavior, but he couldn't help but chuckle softly. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. However, he noticed that her body was extremely stiff. He knew that she was disgusted and even a little jealous. However, he still found it funny and asked knowingly, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Yun Shirshir gave a cold reply, as if she was a little peeved. Mu Yaja smiled faintly. He was a little glad that after Lin Ji's torment tonight, he finally saw that this woman could be quite cute when she was jealous. This was the first time he saw her so jealous. She was fuming with anger, her hands holding her lapels, and a hostile aura that kept people away, especially on that delicate and cute face. Her delicate lips were slightly pouted, and he couldn't help but want to kiss her. And he too had done the same. He grabbed her chin, leaned in, and kissed her lips. Yun Shirshir pushed him away a little angrily, and questioned him a little unhappily. "Does this happen often?" Compared to her inexplicable anxiety, he seemed to be very patient, and responded unhurriedly with a nonchalant attitude. Yun Shirshir was even more displeased. "Do women like her often come knocking on your door in the past?" The she was referring to was naturally Lin Ji. She wondered if there were many women like Lin Ji who had ulterior motives. Coveting him, were those women still sending themselves to his door dauntlessly, like a stream of carrots crossing the river, and begging for his favor? They were clearly in a civilized society of the 21st century, but these things that only happened in ancient times were really happening to her now. How laughable! There were actually women who trampled on him like this. He was happy to see her doubtful attitude. Chapter 15:20. Did this stupid woman finally have a sense of crisis? Did she finally understand that her man was also in high demand and that many women were eyeing him covetously? Finally, she was worried about this too. Mu Yaja was especially satisfied. However, he pretended to be natural and said, "A lot." His provocation was not intentional. Hence, Yun Shirshir did not detect anything unusual from his tone. She frowned and looked shocked. "A lot?" "Yes." The man's lips curled into a smile as he retorted, "Isn't it normal?" Yun Shirshir was suddenly speechless. Yes, wasn't this a very normal thing? There were many such scenes in the entertainment industry. Lin Ji was one of them. Yan Bingqing, Han Yuyen, and the other A-listers had all done the same. Even Yang Mi, who got along with her peacefully, relied on the unspoken rules to get to her position. This was an indisputable fact. The entertainment industry was a luxurious circle. Beauties, money, power, and all kinds of darkness could find shelter here. Yun Shirshir's body stiffened when she thought of this. Mu Yaja said lazily, "There are many women in the entertainment industry. In order to get to the top, they send themselves to the rich man's room. What you don't know is that whenever I book a hotel, my hotel room number and all other information will be revealed in the next second. Then many women will appear at my door, dressed in all kinds of flirtatious and seductive clothes." Yun Shirshir asked relentlessly, "What about you? Do you open the door and let them in?" "No." Mu Yaja was very calm about this. "No?" Yun Shirshir was clearly skeptical of his claim. Then what exactly was the situation just now? Mu Yaja said, "In the past, I didn't like to interact with women in the industry. I thought they were dirty and disgusting. Those bodies looked beautiful, but under those beautiful faces, there was greed and lust. I didn't like it. What about Linji? Yun Shirshir obviously did not want to let go of this point. Why did you let her in? Mu Yaja frowned. He was indeed wronged on this point. Was he the one who let this woman in? I closed the door. Oh. Then she used her leg to block it. Yun Shirshir was shocked again. There was such a thing. This was too much. How could she be so shameless? She was rejected and still shamelessly came to him. How thick-skinned. Yun Shirshir uttered these words with a frown. Mu Yaja teased. Do you think everyone is as thin-skinned as you? Yun Shirshir. She stared at him helplessly. Okay, be good. My little fella is jealous. Mu Yaja patted her head and coaxed her gently, as if coaxing a child. Don't be angry, okay? You won't look good when you're angry. Yun Shirshir completely lost her temper. I'm not in the mood to quarrel with you. She turned her face away. Obviously, she was still sulking. It was true that she could not blame him for this matter. However, she was still very angry and had nowhere to vent her anger. She kept it in her heart and did not know how to release it. She could not blame him, but she did not want to bother with him either. However, Mu Yaja found it funny. This woman, once she started to feel awkward, she really couldn't be coaxed with just a few words. Chapter 15:21. The feeling of being jealous was surprisingly good. Felt really good. At least, it felt like she was being cared for. Mu Yaja was in a good mood. Hence, he reached out and clasped her shoulders, turning her body around to face him. There was a satisfied playfulness in his eyes. Are you jealous? His voice was low and deep, with a hint of devilish magnetism. Just like the rich and mellow red wine, it was enough to intoxicate anyone who heard it. Even Yun Shirshir couldn't help but be stunned by his deep and magnetic voice for a few seconds. When she came back to her senses, she still kept her lips tightly shut and didn't make a sound. Mu Yaja's gaze fell on her face. It was a little charming, a little cute, and a little twisted, but it made him faintly feel more excited. He lowered his head and precisely captured her breath, gently sucking on those tender and moist lips. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but push him. Hey! Mu Yaja didn't have the time to care about her struggle. She exerted more strength in her hand and pushed him away a little. I'm still angry. In other words, she wasn't in the mood to do these things at the moment. Why? He frowned slightly, feeling slightly displeased by her rejection. He didn't like her rejection. However, he could tell that she was still conflicted. Yun Shirshir looked up and stared at him seriously. I don't want this to happen again. She didn't want to see any woman clinging onto him and not letting him go. She didn't even want to see such a ridiculous thing happening in a hotel. She didn't like it and didn't want to see it again. She would feel disgusted, and at the same time she would feel repulsed for a long time. Repulsed because she was extremely insecure. She was afraid of losing him. This feeling of insecure was not good, and it was very unpleasant. Mu Yaja stared at her but didn't say anything for a moment. He kept quiet. In the silence, Yun Shirshir was originally waiting for his response. However, when she didn't get a response, she looked up uneasily and saw that he was also staring at her deeply without blinking, as if he was deep in thought. What happened? Yun Shirshir pursed her lips. Is my request too much? You should admit that you're jealous. Mu Yaja suddenly curled his lips and nodded. He leaned closer to her face and looked into her eyes. He touched her nose and said, You're jealous of me. Yun Shirshir was startled. She knew in her heart that she was indeed jealous. This was undeniable. However, she was reserved and shy. For a moment, she was too embarrassed to admit it. Thus, she said, I just don't like, she stuttered, as clumsy as a helpless child, not knowing how to express the bitterness in her heart. I don't like this feeling. Mu Yaja patiently waited for her to express herself. Yun Shirshir looked up and said, I don't know. The feeling of being coveted by others. This feeling is so annoying. You You can't belong to others. She incoherently spat out every word. Every word was like squeezing toothpaste out of her mouth. Wuxia restrained his gaze and smiled. His handsome eyes were hidden in the shadow of his hair. Hence, at that moment, she didn't see that hidden playfulness in his eyes. Chapter 15:22. In the end, Yun Shirshir mustered up all her courage and clenched her fists tightly. Using all her might, she said, "You belong to me. You belong to me. You belong to me and me alone. Do you understand?" Yun Shirshir looked up at him. The unspoken words in her heart seemed to be silently questioning him. Wuxia's heart skipped a beat. His gaze froze as he stared at her in a daze. He did not expect that he would be waiting for this sentence. Yun Shirshir helplessly tugged at the cuffs of his bathrobe. This small action was more like a silent act of coquettishness. Her tone softened instantly. With a hint of helplessness, she asked, "You belong to me, right?" He had said it before. He belonged to her and her alone. He would promise her a world. He would promise her the whole world. Wuxia was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, he laughed involuntarily. Grabbing her chin, he narrowed his eyes slightly. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he lightly pecked her little mouth that wanted to say something. "Yes, you're right." His broad and warm palm cupped her face. Her face was so small that he did not dare to use any strength when he held her face. He was afraid that he would accidentally hurt her. He pressed his lips against hers, unwilling to leave. Opening his handsome eyes slightly, his pupils were filled with endless charm. They were so dark that they shone brightly. It was as if countless stars were hidden within them, embellished with sparkling starlight. He was so close to her that their eyelashes were intimately intertwined. His eyelashes were so long that even his eyes brushed past her eyelids, leaving behind traces of itchiness. He really loved this torturous little thing. Wuxia pressed the tip of her nose and hugged her waist even tighter. At the same time, he blocked her lips and said, "Listen." Yun Shirshir looked up and gazed into the depths of his eyes. "I belong to you and you alone." He said each word with a pause. Every word was said with incomparable seriousness. "Do you like this answer?" Yun Shirshir was taken aback. It was as if a certain part of her heart had been struck hard, causing her to go limp. Wuxia smiled, but before she could respond, he kissed her. However, this kiss was not as domineering and fierce as it had been at the beginning. Instead, it was soft and gentle as it rubbed against her lips. Hugging her waist, he continued the unending kiss. The seductive kiss went all the way from the entryway to the living room, where they lingered on the sofa. This kiss was no longer limited to the sofa. Pressing his lips against hers, Wuxia's kisses gradually deepened and deepened. At the same time he pried open her lips, his hands also moved. With a few moves, he smoothly untied the knot on her waist. Her knot was very tight, but to him, it took only a few seconds for her clothes to be pushed aside. Yun Shirshir was kissed until she felt like she was about to suffocate. It was rare that he gave her space to breathe. In just a moment, he sealed her lips again and kissed her deeply. She raised her hands and hugged his neck. It was rare for her to take the initiative to pull his bathrobe down to his shoulders, revealing his well-defined shoulders. Wuxia could not help but tease her. "Little one, in such a hurry?" After he said that, Yun Shirshir was extremely embarrassed. Her face suddenly turned red as she stopped her actions and wanted to withdraw her hands.